Chapter 245. The facts were not out of Princess Raima's expectations. None of the three royal highnesses were willing to be left behind. Unexpectedly, the three groups of people rushed forward in a straight line. Fortunately, the street was wide enough. Otherwise, the houses would have been crushed by them. She did not know what the emperor's intentions were. Could it be that they did not fight fiercely enough? Did he want the three of them to fight in front of others and expose their shortcomings and make a fool of themselves? With the current attitude of her three brothers, this was not absolutely impossible. However, the scene that Princess Raimu had envisioned was doomed to not happen. Because the carriages of the three princes were tightly packed together, no one could fall behind in the slightest. Although the streets of the magnificent Jewel Hall and the aristocratic hall were wide enough, but they also had their limits. The carriages of the three princes were squeezed together, and it was inevitable that they would collide with the carriages of the other side. This was not the most coincidental thing. The most coincidental thing was that the other group of carriages belonged to the Prince Equivalent's palace. Out of the 5 groups of carriages of the royal family, 4 of them had unexpectedly collided together. She was afraid that nothing would happen. Was this intentional? Or was it unintentional? Such a result made Princess Raimu feel a little dizzy. The only thing to be thankful for was that the Prince Equivalent's palace was also part of the royal family. As long as her 3 brothers were willing to take a step back, she believed that the matter would not be too difficult to mediate. The aristocratic hall was in charge of receiving the guests. When they saw the situation in front of them, they were all dumbfounded. The street where the magnificent Jewel Hall and the aristocratic hall were located could be said to be the best street in the entire Tianxiang city. The street was also the widest. There had never been such an incident of crowding together. A street that could accommodate 3 luxurious carriages at the same time was not easy to crowd together. Moreover, because of the existence of the magnificent Jewel Hall on this street, there had never been a situation where the incident escalated. Anyone who was qualified to come here was aware of the origins of the magnificent Jewel Hall. No one would be stupid enough to touch the ground in front of them. But now, the palanquin belonging to the Prince Equivalent mansion was the first to stop. 2 plainly dressed maids opened the curtains of the palanquin and helped a small child down from the palanquin. That child was the Prince Equivalent's crown prince's heir, the adorable little boy Yang Imo, who had always been jokingly called a little girl by June Moxie. Princess Raima's carriage automatically moved to the side. The Prince Equivalent's residence represented Prince Equivalent. He was the only member of the Yang family apart from her father. Even if her father, the emperor, was in the carriage, she still had to give way. Moreover, she was very fond of this little brother of hers. Moreover, the Prince Equivalent's palace was one of the aristocratic hall's hidden masters. So, they should have been allowed to enter first. However, the carriages of the 3 princes did not give way to each other. They maintained a straight line and continued to move forward. If this situation continued to develop, it would be really lively when they reached the gate. Among Princess Raimu's carriages, there was a black-robed man coldly watching the carriages of the 3 princes. He observed every movement of the carriages without saying a word, but his eyes were as sharp as an arrow. June Moxie had already received the report at this time. Faced with such an awkward situation, he could not help but anxiously rush out. June Dashao was cursing in his heart. Damn it! You 3 brothers didn't distinguish who's big and who's small, and you actually dare to cause trouble here. If I had known earlier, I would have only given an invitation to save trouble. Fuck. If at this critical juncture you guys really start fighting here, then wouldn't the auction that I've painstakingly organized become a joke? You 3 bastards. When I have the time, I'll play you to death. Fatty Tang and Song Shang were the main hosts of the auction. Naturally, they could not come out. Besides, even if they came out, they might not be able to handle it. After all, the status of these 3 princes was too high. They absolutely could not use force to deal with them face to face. Third Master Jun Wui could certainly handle it. But if Jun Wui came out, he would be directly involved in the competition between the 3 princes. It would not be good to help anyone, so it would not be appropriate. As for the other candidates, of course, General Dugu Wudi could do the same. He would probably be able to settle things with just a roar. The three princes might be out of reach in the eyes of others, but they were not in the eyes of this big shot. However, they were guests after all. It was not nice to use external forces to solve their own problems. Besides, if he really used General Dugu's influence to solve the problem, then what about the 10,000 taels bet? Even if the gambling Saint June won in the end, would he have the face to ask General Dugu for the bet? He had just helped you solve a big problem. Therefore, General Dugu could not do it. After thinking about it, it seemed that only June Moxie could come out personally. Although June Emosie's status couldn't be compared to that of the three princes, but his debauchee reputation as a debauchee was undoubtedly very useful in dealing with this kind of matter. Moreover, he had an endless stream of hoodlums and scoundrels. Therefore, after receiving the report, Jun Wui and Tang Yuan simultaneously looked at Dugu Xiaoyi's face. Jun Dashao's face was being grabbed by Dugu Xiaoyi. Xia, you'll need to resort to some underhanded methods to solve this problem. You're the only one who's suitable. Jun Wui said. What is this? Why am I the most suitable when it comes to using underhanded methods? Jun Dashao was depressed. Boss, as the saying goes, evil people need evil people to deal with them. It's best if you step forward, Tang Yuan flattered. This flattery made Jun Dashao very angry. Evil people need evil people to deal with them? How am I evil people? These words of praise and criticism made Jun Dashao want to curse. What are you talking about? Do I look like an evil person to you? This is outrageous. However, for such a big matter, I really need this expert to make a move. Only then can it be easily resolved. By the time Jun Dashao arrived at the scene, there had already been a commotion. The reason was because Jun Moxie had bumped into Xiao Han, Mu Shuetong, Han Yanyao, and the Murong family's entourage. Mu Shuetong nodded and smiled. Xiao Han snorted and pretended to be arrogant as he ignored Jun Dashao. Only Han Yanyao grabbed Jun Moxie's lapel, pouted, and glared at him. Jun family's boy, hurry up and call me Little Ant. Little Ant will give you something good. Jun Moxie was in a bad mood. He rolled his eyes and said, I say, how can you be so ignorant? Your sister and my third uncle haven't even gotten married yet. Besides, it can only be considered as a marriage. What does it have to do with you? Little Ant. Look at you. You're flat and dry, your chest doesn't rise, your waist doesn't rise, your fetal hair hasn't receded and your milk hasn't dried, and you're already fantasizing about being someone's elder. Have you grown your teeth yet? Wait until you're sure that you've grown all the teeth I've said, then you can pretend to be someone else's elder. Jun Moxie's words were purely infuriating. There was no basis for his nonsense. A girl's puberty came earlier than a boy's. Although Han Yanyao was only 15.5 years old, and her body hadn't fully matured yet. However, it could be said that her figure had already begun to take shape. Even if she was compared to Dugu Xiaoyi, she wouldn't be inferior to Jun Dashao's flat figure. You. Han Yanyao couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry as she listened to Jun Emosie's senseless taunts. She couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry at the same time. She stamped her feet again and again, and her petite face turned red. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and said, I don't care. You look like you have an urgent matter. If you don't call me Little Ant, then I won't let you go. Do as you see fit. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry. She grabbed his lapel even harder as she said this. She was undoubtedly the youngest in the Silver Blizzard City's upper echelon. So, it was useless even if she had a distinguished status. That was because she had to call everyone else elder except herself. Uncle, grand ancestor, great 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 ancestor, and great ancestor. Ever since she had arrived at the Tianxiang city, she had seen this young master Jun Imo Xia was obviously a little older than her, and she had become very interested in him. Moreover, she had learned that this Jun Imo Xia was her elder sister's future brother-in-law, and that he was her true junior. This was a blessing from the heavens, and she was even happier than if she had picked up a gold ingot from the ground. So, how could she let him go so easily? Naturally, she would pester him, and fight for the honor of her little aunt. Oh, hey! Jun Moxie heard that the noise outside was getting louder and louder. So, he stamped his feet and said, okay, I'm afraid of you. I'll call you, okay? Little piggy, is that okay? His voice was a little vague, but he was speaking very briskly. So, the little girl Han didn't hear anything strange in his words. She only thought that he was calling her little aunt. She proudly raised her chin, puffed up her chest, and let go of his hand. Then, she waved her hand and said, "Be good, go. If there's a problem in the future, you can use little aunt's name. Little aunt will protect you." Jun Moxie disappeared like a wisp of smoke, as if he had been pardoned by the emperor. Oh, the way he called me little aunt doesn't sound right. Han Yen Meng suddenly realized something. He called you little piggy, how could he call you little aunt? Morong Qian Jun was pursuing Princess Raimu, and Jun Moxie wasn't on good terms with each other. So, he wanted to please the beauty in front of him. So, how could he not throw stones at her when she was down? Han Yen Meng pouted. She bitterly turned her head to look at Jun Moxie's back, and clenched her small fists. Get lost! Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong fiercely glared at her. Shut up. The two of them had been living together in the Silver City ever since they were born. But, they had never been on good terms with each other. So, this was the first time in their lives that they had spoken in unison. They looked at each other after they had finished speaking. Then, they snorted, and turned their heads away. Morong Qian Jun immediately kept quiet out of fear. Xiao Han obviously loathed this trash of the Morong family. He could tell what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. He was even more furious. Han Yen Meng was the object of his nephew's admiration. She was also the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family. So, he wouldn't be able to live if she was stolen from under his nose. Moreover, you're just a trifling disciple of the Morong family. You're like a toad lusting after a swan's flesh. You're overestimating your own capabilities. Mu Shuetong looked down on this kind of person who added insult to injury. So, he naturally wouldn't give him any face. The third prince and the prince equivalent's heir Yang Imo had already quarreled by the time Jun Moxie had left the carriage. The pretty boy Yang Imo had come into contact with Jun Moxie a few times. So, he had taken quite a liking to this rascally, hoodlum, and scoundrelly debauchee. So, he excitedly ran towards the aristocratic hall as soon as he got out of the palanquin. He was very familiar with this place since he had come here several times before. The eldest prince and the second prince remained motionless in the carriage. They were maintaining a non-existent depth. On the other hand, the third prince was rather unhappy. He had been pushed by the eldest prince and the second prince to the point that he couldn't even walk. But the third prince's strength had always been the weakest among the three princes. Moreover, he had been unlucky enough to be in the same group this time. So, he hadn't been willing to show weakness. So, he had tried to push the third prince a little harder. But, he had still fallen into a disadvantageous position. And, this had left him extremely depressed in his heart. I'm a prince, and I haven't gone in yet. But, this insignificant Prince Yang Imo wants to go in before the three of us. Where is the dignity of the imperial family? He had completely taken things for granted at this time. However, he had completely forgotten that the Prince Equivalent's palace was one of the shareholders of the aristocratic hall. Ah, isn't this cousin Momo? What's wrong? You don't know how to greet your cousins when you see them here. How come you're getting more and more impolite as you grow older? You're a member of the imperial family. How can you run around without any etiquette? Where are the servants of the Prince Equivalent's palace? Don't they know how to serve their masters? The third prince's figure was somewhat thin and weak. His face was a bit pale. He stood up from the carriage and started to berate them in a somewhat feminine voice. He didn't miss a single one of them. Your Highness, hello. Yang Imo timidly looked at him. Yang Mo's small heart was filled with an indescribable loathing for these three princes' cousins. What third prince? The eldest prince and the second prince are still there. You don't even say a word. You don't even know how to be polite. You're so arrogant. Don't tell me that you've never learned etiquette. The third prince looked at Yang Imo in an overbearing manner. His eyes were full of gloominess and pleasure. Naturally, he wasn't targeting Yang Imo. He just wanted to find a suitable punching bag to vent his frustrations. Yang Imo was young, but his status was extremely high. He was an extremely soft and delicious persimmon. The Prince Equivalent had a high status, but he was indifferent to worldly affairs. So, he had never interfered with the politics of the imperial court. His influence in the imperial court was negligible. Therefore, the third prince didn't have any misgivings. He wantonly humiliated the little Yang Imo in front of him. He didn't care that this child was also surnamed Yang. The expression of the black-robed man in Princess Rima's caravan became increasingly gloomy. After all, Yang Imo was only a 10-year-old child. How could he withstand such a harsh reprimand? Moreover, he didn't do anything wrong, so he felt even more wronged. His eyes turned red and filled with tears. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he was about to cry. Third brother, enough. Momo is still a child. Why are you scaring him? Princess Raimu couldn't bear to see him like this. She opened her mouth and was about to step forward to explain when she was pulled back by the black-robed man behind her. Child? Can a child not know etiquette? We are the descendants of the imperial family, the descendants of nobility. How can we be compared to ordinary children? I'm educating him. I want him to know what etiquette is. In the future, don't be so unruly. He's disgracing the imperial family. The corner of the third prince's mouth twitched as he sneered. He did not take this younger sister of his seriously at all. Isn't this the third prince? What big rules, what big tempers. Why are you all blocking the door and not coming in? Aren't you not giving face to the Jun family, the Tang family, and Prince Equivalent? Jun Imo Xie squinted his eyes and crooked his eyebrows. Then, he swaggered over to Yang Imo, and stood in front of him. Then, he twisted his buttocks, and assumed a slanted posture. In fact, it seemed as if he was about to fall over. With a swoosh, he unfolded a gold folding fan. It was already late autumn. The heat was gone, and it was slightly cold. However, young Master Jun was still leisurely waving his fan. His demeanor was so flat that anyone who saw him couldn't help but feel the urge to beat him up. Jun Sunshao, this prince is disciplining my sister-in-law. This has nothing to do with you. The third prince looked down on this debauchee. In his eyes, he was a useless person who relied on his father's generation to eat and wait to die. How can this have nothing to do with me? Third prince, you intercepted the third boss of our aristocratic hall and lectured him incessantly. This has caused our auction to be unable to be held normally. But, how can you say that this has nothing to do with me? How can there be such logic in this world? Jun Dashao didn't give him any face. In Jun Dashao's eyes, this guy was also a useless person who relied on his father's generation to eat and wait to die. He didn't have the slightest ability, but he was ambitious and ambitious. Jun Moxie pretended to be ambitious. He puffed out his chest, and his body swayed a bit. It seemed as if he couldn't stand still. Then, he continued, this matter is related to the shining silver and glistening gold of our aristocratic hall. But, we have to pay taxes to the country if we want to make money. You're hindering us from making money. And, you're hindering the country from paying taxes. And, you're hindering the country from paying taxes. And you're hindering the country from paying taxes. And you're hindering the country's livelihood. Third Highness, do you want to rebel? Jun Moxie danced with joy. His spittle flew in all directions. He went around in circles, and put a big groundless hat on the third prince's head. The third prince trembled in anger. Jun Moxie, what nonsense are you talking about? Who are you saying wants to rebel? Jun Moxie squinted his eyes. Third prince, what has our Tianxiang Empire done to you? The people of the empire provide you with luxurious clothes and good food. They provide you with glory and splendor. They provide you with a noble title. They provide you with a high position. And, you want to rebel? Why are you doing this? Don't you have any humanity left? Jun Moxie spoke with grief and indignation. You were born into the royal family. You're the majestic third prince. And, you're still not satisfied? Don't tell me you want to kill your own brothers and sisters. Don't tell me you'll only stop after you've ascended to the throne. Don't tell me there's really no kin in the royal family. The third prince was completely dumbfounded. This guy was talking non-stop. His face was full of hatred, grievance, grief, and indignation. From his mouth, he had instantly become a heartless and unscrupulous person. If he were to continue talking, who knew what else he would say? It was as if he didn't die, and wouldn't be able to thank the world. Why is this guy not holding back at all? He dares to say anything. You're a debauchee. You don't know how to hold back. You can't treat everyone like you. Seeing that he was still shamelessly talking, the third prince's face would be even more humiliated. If someone were to hear this and spread it to the emperor's ears, he hurriedly rushed forward and covered his mouth. His voice was already begging, Jun Sunshao, you, don't say any more. Do you want me to die? I was wrong, okay. I'll apologize to you. Jun Moxie made a few sounds before he finally calmed down. Then, he snorted in protest. His complexion changed, and suddenly became radiant. Oh, it's rare to have the three royal highnesses and Princess Raimu personally come to visit my humble aristocratic hall. Ha ha ha. Your presence brings light to my humble aristocratic hall. I'm even more flattered. Please come in quickly. He turned around and roared, Motherfucker, what the hell are you doing? The three royal highnesses have been waiting for so long, but you still haven't welcomed them in. Who can afford to bear the crime of neglecting the royal highnesses? Someone, quickly bring the royal highnesses and the princess into the hall. What? Into the hall, everyone had a strange expression on their faces. This guy wants to let the three princes and the princess into the hall? Which hall in the world would dare to let the princes and the princess into the hall? I reckon this is the only one. This is a worthwhile trip. This is an eye-opener. Among the four teams, there were quite a number of people who were watching young Master Jun's actions closely. For example, how is it? The first prince asked the people around him. There was a gloomy look in his eyes. It's hard to say. A man with a goatee said in a pensive manner, this Jun Sunshao is undoubtedly very arrogant. He's very much in line with the rumors. He's an ignorant, incompetent, lawless, and insensible person. But the outcome of today's matter has been handled in a very clever manner. But the Royal Highness can observe him in detail if you think it's necessary. The people beside him nodded in agreement. This guy has given me a surprise today. I had thought that he wouldn't be able to handle this matter. So, I was happy to watch him make a fool of himself. But, this scene suits me even better. The first prince nodded. Then, he smiled, but this kind of hooligan and scoundrel's methods have always been the most troublesome. As for observing him in detail, do you think it's worth it? Ha ha. Everyone burst into laughter. For example, he's still as shameless as ever. It's disgusting to the extreme. The second prince looked at Jun Moxie from afar. He didn't even try to conceal the disgust in his eyes. Cheng Deqiao clenched his teeth and said, such a scum. It's a disgrace to live in this world. The Jun family's descendant is so unbearable. How can he live in this world? If I were him, I would have died a long time ago. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Jun Moxie, my people are here. Let's see how long you can stay arrogant for. I'll pay you back double for the humiliation I suffered last time. Just wait for your death. Next to him, the white-bearded Fong Bo Wen had a pensive look on his face as he slowly said, "Today's matter is very strange." He pondered for a moment. Then, he shook his head and said, "It's very strange." Princess Raimu. The black-robed man behind her asked in a low voice, "Is this the rumored Jun family's third young master?" Jun Moxie. He's very different from when he was a child. He's a very interesting kid. Evil Monarch Group 2, 4, and 5 have been disbanded due to the theft of the group owner's account. 3 new groups have been created. Brothers, come. Don't leave me. Group 2, 118, 513, 469. Group 4, 29,797,753. Chapter 246. Today's explosive first chapter. It's almost 6 o'clock. I'm going to sleep. I'll get up in the afternoon to write. Yes. That debauchee. Interesting. He's so annoying. How is he interesting? He's arrogant, and has no manners. He lacks even the slightest bit of self-cultivation. It makes people want to vomit. Princess Raimu looked at Jun Moxie angrily. There was one thing that she didn't dare to say in her heart. I don't know why Xiao Yi would fall for a hoodlum like him. Princess Raimu knew how harmful these words were. She knew what her imperial father was afraid of. So, she didn't dare to say these words. Everyone has their own opinion. The black-robed man said in a meaningful tone. He didn't change his opinion because of Princess Raimu's words. Instead, he watched Jun Moxie's back with a pensive look on his face. This grandson of Jun Zhantian is not simple. The third prince had deliberately tried to stir up trouble. But, he had completely disrupted his plans with just a few words. Then, the third prince had turned the whole matter into nothingness. The method was a bit dishonorable. But, it was the best method to cut through the Gordian knot. It would take a long time for the third prince to be entangled in any other way. There would be no way to resolve the problem if the third prince was blindly arguing with him. As a father, how could he not know the temperament of his third prince? If he wasn't born into the imperial family and had the status of a prince, he would have been a good-for-nothing who relied on his father's generation to eat and wait to die. No matter what method it was the best method as long as it was effective in the shortest time possible. And, Jun Moxie had obviously adopted the best method. This rumor of debauchee isn't as good as meeting him in person. He doesn't live up to his reputation, the black-robed man frowned. He looked pensive, but no one knew what he was thinking. The entourage from the imperial family finally entered the aristocratic hall under Jun Moxie's attentive greeting. However, each person could only bring 2 people in. The rest of the entourage had to stay outside. However, when it was the second prince's turn, he insisted on bringing 3 people with him. Jun Mo Xia looked at the 3 men. One of them was Fong Bo Wen. He was the second prince's advisor, so it was only natural that he would follow him. The other man had delicate features and a thin stature. He looked at Jun Mo Xia with hatred in his eyes. Yes, she was also an acquaintance. She was the Spirit Fog Lakes and Chong Pavilion's Lady Yu, who claimed that she only sold her skills and not her body. It was no wonder that the second prince's confidant would be brought in. And the other one was Qing De Chao. Jun Dashao stretched out his hand without any trace of politeness, and blocked Qing De Chao from entering. I'm sorry, Qing Dashao, but only 3 people can enter from each invitation card. Your Highness, this place is full, so you can't go in. It's better for you to wait outside. We'll serve you some refreshments later. Why can't I go in? Qing De Chao glared at her. It seemed as if he wanted to eat her alive. This fellow didn't stop others, but insisted on going against him. What was the meaning of this? Are you looking down on me? The second prince and his entourage also turned around to look at them. It wasn't good for the second prince to abandon these three people. But Qing De Chao was the representative of a faction. So, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and bring him in. He had thought that it wouldn't be a big deal to bring another person with his status as a prince. So, he could turn a blind eye to this matter. However, he hadn't expected that this bastard Jun Moxie would stir up trouble again. In fact, the young Master Jun would have turned a blind eye to it if it had been someone else. However, this person was Qing De Chao, and he couldn't allow it. Don't say that you've violated the rules. Even if you haven't, I'll find a way to make you break the rules. Then, I'll find trouble with you. This unlucky bastard's name isn't pleasing to my ears. And, this guy is even more unpleasant to my eyes. I'm sorry, but your group is full. Jun Moxie straightened his neck, and looked at Qing De Chao as if he was looking at a monkey in the zoo. What are you going to do? You've violated the rules of this hall. So, this young master is acting according to the rules. So, naturally, I can't let you in. What credibility would the hall have if anyone could break the rules at will? Why? Qing De Chao was anxious. It would have been fine if I hadn't come in from the beginning. But, I've already arrived here, and I'm only one step away from entering. So, wouldn't I become a joke if I returned? What would people think of me? I'm with the second prince. So, why can't I go in? Eggy? Jun Moxie deliberately misinterpreted his words. He sneered, and frivolously nodded his head. What you're saying is very reasonable. For example, the chicken and the eggy are together. But the chicken can go in, but can the eggy? You're such a clear person. So, why are you pestering us endlessly? Don't tell me that your eggy is so special that it can go in. If that's the case, then it wouldn't be a waste to let an extraordinary person like you in. Qing De Chao was dazzled by Jun Moxie's twisted explanation. He almost spat out blood. It's an extraordinary shame and humiliation to be compared in such a manner. The two men in black behind Princess Raimu couldn't help but laugh out loud when they heard these words. They laughed twice, but then realized that the situation wasn't right. So, they shut their mouths, but their bodies and shoulders were trembling violently. The first prince and the third prince couldn't help but laugh out loud when they heard these words. Their faces had turned red, and it seemed as if they had been injected with chicken blood. However, they didn't mind. The more the second prince's men made a fool of themselves, the happier they would be. It's just that Jun Moxie really knows how to use metaphors. It's really mischievous. He had actually compared the second prince to a chicken, and Qing De Chao to an eggy, only the second prince and the others didn't laugh. On the contrary, the second prince's eyes were twitching in anger, and his face had turned black. Jun Moxie, don't go too far. Qing De Chao was gasping for breath. His eyes were bloodshot, and were glaring like bells. He was on the verge of exploding. I'm bullying you, so what? Are you going to bite me? Do you really think that your eggy has no taboos? Jun Moxie tilted his buttocks, and arrogantly looked at him. Then, he suddenly twisted his buttocks, and his lower body swayed back and forth rhythmically. I'm bullying you, I'm bullying you. I want to bully you, but your eggy won't let me in. Puff! Young Master Qing spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared at Jun Moxie with hatred in his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked away. What a big pair of eyes. Like a donkey's eyes. Are you trying to scare me? Are you threatening me? Bah! Jun Moxie spat out a mouthful of saliva in disdain. Then, he turned around, and met the second prince's murderous eyes. He forced a smile, and explained, Your Highness, please don't misunderstand. That chicken wasn't talking about you, it was just a metaphor. This was even more infuriating than not explaining. The second prince groaned heavily. Then, he flicked his sleeves, and walked in with a stern face. Everyone followed him. But, as they walked, someone couldn't help but burst into laughter from time to time. Then, he covered his mouth and coughed. This was especially the case for the two attendants of Princess Raimu. These two people didn't have any scruples. This attracted June Moxie's attention immediately. June Moxie was surprised to find that the attendants of Princess Raimu were two men in black robes. And, they didn't look young. Princess Raimu didn't bring her maidservants? What's going on? June Dashao's sensitive nerves immediately paid attention to this matter. But, he didn't show it on the surface. He just laughed and joked with everyone with a strange accent. Then, he quickly paid attention to them. The two of them were in disguise. And, they both had beards. So, they weren't eunuchs. Princess Raimu wasn't forced. In other words, Princess Raimu knew who these two people were. Besides, Princess Raimu was very respectful to these two people. It was the kind of respect that came from the bones. These two people were definitely not simple. And, there was one thing that was very surprising. Yi Gahan wasn't beside Princess Raimu. Even within a radius of a few hundred feet, there was no sign of Yi Gahan's aura. What reason could make Yi Gahan leave the princess? With Yi Gahan's temper, who would he worry about the most in Tianxiang City? So strange. Perhaps, the answer to all these mysteries lies with these two people? As long as we know who these two people are, everything will become clear. June Moxie suddenly remembered the rumor that Yi Gahan and the Empress were childhood sweethearts. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Could it be that this small act of burning incense had attracted a great Buddha? But, why are there two of them? Everything makes sense if it's really him. But, who is the other one? There doesn't seem to be any information on this person. June Dashao continued to ponder. The aristocratic hall's auction hall was right in front of them. Two huge golden osmanthus flowers stood symmetrically on each side. The leaves were lush, and the golden flowers didn't show any signs of withering. They were in full bloom, and a rich fragrance filled the entire courtyard. The hall's door opened, and everyone discovered that it was a very big place inside. In fact, it could even be said to be a small public square. June Xia had put in a lot of effort for this hall. He had opened up all the adjacent rooms, and had even replaced the load-bearing walls with marble pillars carved with dragons and phoenixes. There were 100 tables neatly arranged inside the hall. There were exactly 100 tables. There was only one chair behind each table. There were 2 stools at the back of the hall, and a small tea table. On both sides of each table, there was an exquisite potted plant with lush green leaves and beautiful flowers. The distance between each table was at least 10 feet. The distance was the same. Looking at it from both sides, it was a straight line. Of course, it would be a different story if a fatty like Tang Yuan were to appear in this straight line. But, a fatty's unique physique would be hard to find in the heavens or on the earth. More than 300 people entered the hall in a single file. But, it didn't seem crowded at all. On the contrary, it felt somewhat empty. The windows above had already been opened, and the air was unusually fresh. In fact, it didn't feel stuffy at all. Entering this hall made people feel more relaxed and happy than entering a garden in spring. Chapter 247. Waves of ethereal music floated down from the upper floors, and reverberated in the hall. These music weren't very rare. But, they could only hear the music and not see the people. Instead, they felt that this very ordinary music had added a bit of elegance to it. The floor was covered with a thick layer of green carpet. It gave off an exceptionally heavy feeling. The color wasn't very conspicuous, but it gave off a warm and luxurious feeling. Each table had a list of names written on it. The first row naturally belonged to the royal family. They were like cranes in a flock of chickens. There were only 4 tables. Everyone was thinking in their hearts, this aristocratic hall is really a big deal. Even the royal family didn't arrange a private room for us. However, the more they were in the same hall, the more they felt that they had entered the ranks of the real nobles. They weren't far from the royal family. So, how could they not be considered nobles? Therefore, everyone was very happy, except for the royal family. The second row was for the people of the big families. They weren't arranged in any particular order. The third row was for the descendants of the officials, as well as the wealthy families. And the fourth row was for the rich and powerful of the Tianxiang city. In between each row, there was a pearl curtain that seemed to fall from the sky. However, it only covered 3 feet above the people's heads, causing everyone to feel that the other side was hazy and couldn't see clearly. There was an extremely exquisite red-crowned crane incense burner in every corner of the hall. Green smoke was slowly coming out of the crane's beaks, and was drifting in the air. It was very auspicious. Some people had arrived very early. They had been waiting for almost half the morning. But they didn't have the slightest impatience on their faces. On the contrary, they seemed to be full of vigor and excitement. Dozens of yellow-clothed young girls were carrying teacups. They were like butterflies passing through flowers. Their figures were graceful, and their appearances were pretty. Their manners were elegant, and they had a sense of propriety. There was a thick milky white tapestry in front of the first row. It seemed as if it had fallen from the sky. It covered the entire area behind it. It looked like an exceptionally thick wall at first glance. The music stopped abruptly. Everyone's spirits were lifted. A good show was finally about to begin. The snow-white tapestry in front of him rose up silently, revealing a huge snow-white platform. Just as the tapestry rose up and the auction platform was revealed, the surroundings suddenly became bright and resplendent. It was the result of innumerable gems being inlaid, and then refracting from different parts to converge into a circle of light, covering the round platform, forming a small area. There was a table there. There was a hammer on the table, a tuning hammer. This was simply a dreamlike arrangement. The magnificent jewel hall, which was known as the continent's #1 auction house, compared to such a design, was simply like a pheasant meeting a golden phoenix, or a beggar facing a prince. The sound of heavy footsteps rang out. Everyone looked over at the same time. Just listening to this sound made them feel that it was not normal. What kind of heavy object did he have to carry to be able to produce such soul-shaking footsteps? At the end of the light, a mountain of flesh was proudly walking over with a majestic gait. With every step it took, the plump white flesh under the black robe would dance in a joyful and rhythmic manner. Since everyone has received an invitation from the aristocratic hall, then you are all nobles of the Tianxiang city, and also our distinguished guests. I am the aristocratic hall's treasurer, Tang Yuan, and also the chief auctioneer. On behalf of the Prince Equivalent's mansion, the Jun family, and the Tang family, as well as the aristocratic hall, I would like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you. Tang Yuan spoke in a loud and fluent manner. After he finished speaking, he unexpectedly bowed. In fact, Fatty Tang was still reciting from his book. Because this speech was personally written by Jun Dashao. It was voluminous, and almost included the construction of spiritual and material civilization. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Regardless of whether the words "nobles of the Tianxiang city" were genuine or not, they would at least be able to suppress those who didn't want to deal with them. The aristocratic hall, as the name suggests, is a place where only true nobles can come. So, what exactly is a noble? Fatty did his best to put his hands behind his back, and put on a commanding appearance as he spoke with great difficulty. It must be said that Fatty's body was fat, and his stature wasn't short. His limbs were normal, and even though he wasn't tall and mighty, he still had the physique of an average person. However, after adding that fat to his body, his arms were wrapped in fat, and they were no longer short. Moreover, his waist was extremely thick, and he couldn't wrap his arms around his waist. Therefore, his 2 fat hands couldn't reach each other. However, Tang Yuan still followed Jun Dashao's instructions, and did his best to put on such a posture in order to show his elegance and confidence. However, Tang Yuan felt very good about himself, and felt that this was the most eye-catching moment of his life. However, in the eyes of the people below, He looked like a black bear who was taking an elegant stroll with his hands behind his back. His every movement seemed extremely clumsy. Everyone was trying their best to hold back their laughter. Fatty Tang swept his eyes around in a dignified manner. The so-called nobles are the people of the upper class. For example, this thing. Tang Yuan flipped his hand, and a round object appeared on his palm. I believe everyone here knows and has tasted this crop known as potatoes. As everyone knows, a gene of potatoes can be bought in the market for less than 3 copper coins. It is the most common vegetable. But Tang Yuan paused for a moment to keep everyone in suspense. Everyone could not understand. This fellow was talking about nobles, so why did he pull out a potato? This thing was something that rich families and prestigious families would never put on the table. 3 copper coins for a gene of potatoes. Not only is it cheap, it is also easy to make into a dish. All you need to do is boil it in water at home and you can eat it. You can cut it into shreds, slices, or cubes. It's all to your liking. Tang Yuan felt that his choice of words was very cultured, giving off the feeling of a great scholar. He could not help but put on a cultured and refined smile. However, in the eyes of the nobles below the stage, it was as though a gene of pork hanging on the wall had been whipped. It was simply too horrible to look at. However, as long as it is placed in a tavern, regardless of whether it is cut into shreds or slices, as long as it is made into a dish, it will cost half a tael of silver. That's 100 times the profit. Fatty Tang went on and on. Those who spend half a tael of silver in a tavern are obviously nobles when compared to those who cook at home. Nobles eat at the same price. However, this is still a relatively low-class dish. If it is a higher-class tavern, the same dish of shredded potatoes would cost at least 3 taels of silver. Naturally, it is a higher class here. Let's go even higher. For example, if you go to a brothel at the Spirit Fog Lake and order a dish of shredded potatoes with a prostitute in each hand, it would cost 20 taels of silver. If you were to ask for the company of a big shot who only sells her skills but not her body, the price of the shredded potatoes would increase. I reckon that it would cost less than 50 taels of silver. In any case, if you can ask for the company of a big shot at the Spirit Fog Lake, why would you care about some money? When Fatty Tang reached a point where he was in high spirits, it was as though he was giving a speech to a group of customers in a brothel. He kept blinking his eyes and his face revealed a smile that only men could understand. As expected, a wave of vulgar laughter rang out from below. This kind of laughter made the few female guests in the hall frown. Especially you, big shot, who came with the second prince. She was so angry that her pretty face turned green. Princess Raimu heard such laughter coming from beside her. She turned her head and saw that her father was squinting his eyes and stroking his beard. There was a light in his eyes. It was as if he had found a confidant. His smile was boundless and full of sympathy. She couldn't help but cough. Then, she coughed a little harder. She said in a low voice, "Humph. Men are not good people." His Majesty coughed twice in embarrassment. Then, his face became as gloomy as water. He hurriedly put away his unrestrained memories and sat upright on a small stool with a serious look on his face. But in his heart, he thought, fuck. I was almost fooled by this fatty. I am a refined man. Of course, if you go to the 9th floor of the most luxurious tavern in Tianxiang City, and order a dish of shredded potatoes, it will cost you 100 taels of silver. Tang Yuan stretched out a finger and gently waved it in front of his eyes. He had learned this action from Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie was tall and slender with slender fingers. When he performed this action, it was naturally quite elegant. Moreover, it brought out the arrogance in his bones. Tang Yuan was extremely envious. He had learned it in secret, and at this moment, under the watchful eyes of a large crowd, he had displayed it in an extremely confident and at ease manner. In his heart, he was secretly pleased. This brother of his had finally revealed his face. Fatty had undoubtedly shown his face. To be more accurate, it should be said that his face was exposed, because in the eyes of others, The fatty was like an old sow who was so fat that she could not even walk. She was dangling a carrot in her hoof as if she was still alive. Furthermore, she was trembling a little nervously, and there was even a smug smile on her face. All the nobles present felt their blood run cold. Even the powerhouses with extraordinary strength were no exception. It was just too disgusting. 100 taels of silver is enough for an ordinary family of 4 to buy potatoes for 5 years. But in heaven-reaching pagoda, they can only eat a plate of shredded potatoes. It is the cheapest dish on the top floor of heaven-reaching pagoda. It is a home-cooked dish that can be eaten anywhere. Tang Yuan laughed out loud. He raised his arms and shouted, "Is this really potato shredded? No. This was eating with style, eating with elegance. This is eating with status. This is eating with taste. Moreover, this is the price of eating. This is the loneliness of being at the top. This is the true enjoyment of nobility." Everyone who is sitting in this hall of the aristocratic hall has a status equivalent to sitting on the 9th floor of the heaven-reaching pagoda among the rich people of Tianxiang City. Tang Yuan's voice was hoarse. His muscles were trembling with excitement. His expression was ferocious and crazy. This is the true paradise of nobility. Even if we drink a cup of water here, it is still the water of a true nobility. Using a phrase from before, we are not drinking water, but the loneliness of being at the top. The loneliness of being at the top is something that only true nobility can understand. Thunderous applause rang out. The fatty's words could be said to have won the hearts of the people, and naturally resonated with them. Chapter 248. Jun Wui shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. Little Yang Imo also started to laugh. Although the little rascal didn't understand the meaning behind Jun Mo's words, but he was well aware that potatoes and plain water weren't very tasty. Tang Yuan was too fat, careless, and careless. His memory wasn't very good either, and he had long since forgotten the contents of his speech. His speech was purely improvised on the spot, and he was able to rely on the remnants of his memory to make it sound convincing. He was truly a talent. Fatty Tang was still talking non-stop. Jun Dashao didn't have any interest in listening anymore. He looked at Yang Imo with a smile. "What's wrong? Are you in a good mood, little Miss Yang?" Yang Mo's handsome little face sank. He had always taboo when Jun Moxie called him Little Miss. Unexpectedly, he forgot to refute it. He snorted and turned his head away in anger. Although the prince equivalent's crown prince was clever and quick-witted, he was only a 10-year-old child after all. Encountering such a humiliating matter, he naturally could not remain calm for a moment. Not to mention him, even if it was an adult who was not too shrewd, he would not be able to withstand it. What's the use of being angry? Hitman Jun snorted. He didn't try to coax him. Instead, he crossed his legs and swayed back and forth. "You're being bullied. You only know how to get angry. You can't do anything else. In that case, it's better not to get angry. Since being angry is useless, then what can I do?" Yang Imo had been holding back his tears for a long time. Finally, they overflowed. "Calling you Little Miss isn't wrong. You cry whenever something happens. What are you crying for? You're a man, yet you cry so easily. It's really shameful. No wonder you're being bullied," Jun Moxie said disdainfully. He grabbed a big apple from the table and took a bite. "What's the use of crying? Can crying solve the problem? If you cry again, then get out of my sight. Go cry somewhere else. I won't say a word to you, and I won't give you any ideas to help you vent your anger. I won't cry." Yang Imo hastily wiped his tears, but still choked with sobs. He looked at the young master Jun. "Brother Jun, father said that you're a smart man. Tell me, what should I do? The three of them loved to bully me since I was a child. Every time I see them, I'm scared out of my wits. I don't dare to think of anything. I just want to run away immediately. Brother Jun, tell me, what should I do to stop being bullied by them? How can I take revenge and vent my anger?" Take revenge and vent your anger. There's nothing I can do about it. Jun Moxie didn't even bat an eyelid as he calmly said, he is the Emperor's son. What was the greatest in the secular world? The Emperor reigned supreme. If the Emperor's son wanted to bully you, what could you do? Just bear with it. Who asked you not to have a better family background? But I don't want to bear with it. Brother Emos, yeah, father said that you're the smartest. There's nothing that can stump you. Yang Emo grabbed Jun Moxie's right hand and shook it. Give me an idea, I beg you, Brother Emos, yeah. Stop, quickly stop. Jun Emos, yeah, hastily pushed his hand away, and said impatiently, this isn't a matter of being smart or not. His father is the Emperor, and your father isn't the Emperor. So, how can I help you? There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Yang Emo stared blankly. His eyes instantly became misty, and it seemed as if they were about to flow out. His small mouth flattened, and he was about to burst into tears. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he swallowed his tears. His eyes sparkled as he silently said, Brother Emos, yeah, you just said that his father is the Emperor, but your father isn't the Emperor. Why isn't my father the Emperor? We're both sons of the Emperor's grandfather. Why is my father a prince, and my uncle the Emperor? I'm also the Emperor's descendant. Why can they bully me, but I can't resist? Yang Emo opened his big round eyes and asked Jun Emos, yeah. You said it yourself just now. You're talking about the Emperor's grandfather and the bloodline. That's your family's business. How would I know? Jun Moxie seemed a little impatient as he continued, you say that your father was just as useless as you are. He was bullied since he was a child, but he didn't dare to resist. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. He got used to it, and grew up to be bullied. Naturally, he couldn't become the Emperor. Even his son is being bullied now. I don't want to be bullied again. Yang Emo fiercely clenched his small fist, I don't want to be bullied again when I grow up. And my descendants, I don't want them to be bullied. That's not easy, it's hard. Jun Moxie sighed hypocritically. Can I not be bullied only when I become the Emperor? I won't be bullied, and my descendants won't be bullied either. Little Yang Emo asked. Jun Moxie sighed, I don't know. I really don't know. I also want to be the Emperor. What do you say? Yang Emo opened his big innocent eyes. You? You just said that you're the grandson of your grandfather. So, you naturally have the qualifications. Jun Moxie squinted his eyes, I have the basic qualifications. But, I'm far from qualified for the other things. Then, I ask elder brother Emos to tell me how qualified I am. I don't want to be bullied again. Yang Emo asked. Just as Jun Moxie was about to answer, he heard a deafening cough from Jun Wui's side. It was as if he was suffering from tuberculosis and was afraid that others could not hear it. Such a deafening cough was limited to this independent room. He really deserved to be called a Tian Xian expert. To be able to control and release it so freely, it was really amazing. Jun Wui felt that something was wrong the more he listened. He was originally trying to make the child happy. How did the topic change to usurping the throne? Moreover, it was blatant. With Jun Emo's method of educating children, little Yang Emo wouldn't need too much time. In fact, he would only need to follow Jun Emo's for a month or two. In fact, he would be looking down on Jun Emo's methods if he were to use another month or two. In fact, he would only need a few days of effort to successfully instigate the prince-equivalent son into a hardcore rebel. In fact, he wouldn't have any regrets even if he were to die. This kid, what is he trying to do? This question, I can't answer you. When you go home, don't ask your father. Your father will definitely say, you bullied me well. Just in time to teach you a lesson from me. So what? So what? As long as you are honest, no one will bully you. Jun Moxie imitated the prince's tone. How do you know? Every time I am bullied, my father almost always says the same thing. But they still bully me the same way, and it gets worse and worse. Yang Imo blinked his eyes with a face full of worship. This elder brother Jun is really smart. Because my grandfather also said the same thing. Jun Moxie thought in his heart, but he would not say it out loud. He snorted twice and said, "Of course I know. I also know that you are a little traitor. You turn around and tell your father what others say to you. Am I right? I will not betray my friends. My father said that people who betray their friends are not good people. I am a good person. I will definitely not betray my friends." Little Yang Mo's tender face turned red. "Why are you in such a hurry?" Jun Moxie rolled his eyes at him and said, "But there is no way. Let me tell you a story first, okay?" Yang Imo hung his head dejectedly and said disinterestedly, "Okay." Jun Wuyi's heart finally calmed down, and he stealthily wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. These two little lunatics finally stopped discussing that sensitive topic and started telling stories. I was almost scared out of my wits just now. The name of this story is The Incident of Black Tortoise Gate, Jun Moxie said with a smile. And so, Tang Taizong, Li Shimin, became the prince's crown prince, while Li Jiancheng and Li Yuanji became Li Shimin's cousins, who also loved to bully him. A certain cousin endured again and again until he could not bear it anymore and killed his two cousins at Black Tortoise Gate. He sat on the throne and finally did not have to be bullied by others. Jun Wui accompanied Yang Imo and listened with a smile. He often listened to Jun Moxie's stories, and he liked them very much. For example, there was a story called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The content of the story made Jun Wui feel intoxicated. Today, he saw that Jun Moxie was going to tell a story. Moreover, he had never heard the name of the story before. So, he naturally paid attention to it. But as Jun Moxie's patient speech continued, Jun Wui's relaxed nerves suddenly tensed up again before he could even finish listening. In fact, he was even more tense than before. In fact, his whole body was drenched in cold sweat. The king of stories, the great master Jun's story was able to make a Tianxian expert startle to such an extent. This achievement cannot be considered as unparalleled, but it is certainly unprecedented. Oh my God! Are you really going to make me, the blood general, die of anger and scare me to death today? Jun Moxie, what kind of *T story are you telling? Oh my God! I reckon that Yang Imo would have heard it if you had simply instigated a rebellion. Children don't bear grudges. But you're telling this story, isn't it like pouring a bucket of oil on the fire? Well done. You should have killed them like this. Show no mercy. Little Yang Imo waved his hand excitedly and cheered loudly. His eyes suddenly flashed with a strange light. Is it longing? Or longing? Or fanaticism, or something else? Jun Moxie's eyes flashed. It's almost time. How much can a child remember if I say too much? A seed needs to be watered little by little in order to grow into a big tree. It will drown if it is thrown into the ocean. A burst of strange fragrance spread out from below with a loud bang. It caused a stifled cry of surprise. The people upstairs all focused their attention on it. The auction of the heavenly wine had finally begun after a great deal of fanfare. A tall and straight old man appeared on the stage. He looked to be in high spirits. His clothes were clean and tidy, and his eyebrows were as thick as swords. Even Jun Moxie was surprised to see this man. Is this the sloppy old song? Clothes make the man, and the saddle makes the man. He's wearing new clothes. His back isn't hunched, and his waist isn't bent anymore. It seems as if he's been reborn. I present a cup of wine to a gentleman, and a body of wounds to a gentleman. Song Shang. Someone in the audience immediately recognized Old Song as soon as he appeared on the stage. Song Shang was rumored to be an expert on the same level as Tian Xian. And now, he's the auctioneer of the aristocratic hall. He's really aristocratic. The strong smell of wine wafted through the air. Everyone couldn't help but take a deep breath. This kind of fine wine, just based on the fragrance alone, was already worthy of the title of heavenly wine. Everyone couldn't wait any longer. The black-robed man standing behind Princess Raimo took a deep breath. A strange light flashed in his eyes. He was the emperor of a country, but he had never tasted this kind of wine before. It was clear to see how rare this wine was. Chapter 249. It's no wonder that the aristocratic hall has put up such a top-notch wine as the first item to be auctioned. It turns out that this wine is a heavenly wine that has been meticulously brewed by the god of wine, Song Shang. Song Shang himself hadn't said anything. Moreover, he hadn't admitted that this wine was brewed by him. However, everyone present couldn't help but think so. After all, Song Shang was a top-notch assassin of the Tian Xian clan. But, Song Shang's reputation as the god of wine was deeply rooted in the hearts of these high-level people. Several maids strolled out with large trays in their hands under the watchful eyes of everyone present. And, there were dozens of small, wine cups on each tray. These wine cups were called wine cups. In fact, they were about the same size as the smallest wine cup. But they were more exquisite and exquisite. They were made of silver, and were as thin as a cicada's wings. They were sparkling. These wine cups were made of pure silver. They were pleasing to the eyes. But they could also make people feel at ease when drinking them. After all, a poisonous wine can't be contained in a silver cup. This was enough to show that the aristocratic hall was very considerate and considerate. 3 wine cups were placed on every table. After which, a couple of female servants carried the wine pot and carefully filled the cups one at a time, afraid that even half a drop would leak out. Cool good wine flowed out from the mouth of the pot and poured into the wine cups. As the wine cups were gradually filled one at a time, the fragrance in the hall also became increasingly rich. Everyone looked at the wine cups in front of them. They couldn't help but swallow a few mouthfuls of saliva regardless of their status or wealth. The main item of this auction has never appeared on the continent before. It's a heavenly wine. Now, I would like to invite everyone to have a taste of this wine. This way, everyone will have a good idea of what's going to happen in the auction. Song Shang's loud voice shook the entire audience. He stood on the stage, but he looked very different from Tang Yuan. He was like a deep pool and a lofty mountain. He had the demeanor of a Tian Xian clan expert. I believe that after everyone has tasted this wine, they will all feel that this wine is simply a divine wine, a priceless treasure. It doesn't matter how much you spend or what price you have to pay for this wine. Everything will be worth it as long as you can obtain it. Song Shang waved his hand. Please. Everyone had been captivated by this marvelous wine that they had never seen before. So, they impatiently raised their wine cups. This wine cup was as small as a finger's size. However, everyone couldn't help but curse the aristocratic hall for being stingy in their hearts. Everyone must be saying in your heart that the wine cup is really too small, that it's really not enough to drink. Song Shang leisurely said, I will respectfully apologize to this hall first. Everyone, please think about it. If we let everyone drink to their heart's content as soon as it's served, what meaning would there be to treasure it? Not to mention spending a lot of money to auction it later. This is my selfishness, but I do not wish to profane this godly wine. Everyone here was experienced and knowledgeable, so how could they not understand the logic behind it? They all dismissed it with a smile. Everyone raised their cups and drained the wine in the midst of laughter. Princess Raimo wasn't good at drinking. She didn't like drinking. Moreover, she wouldn't dare to drink even if she was good at drinking. There were 2 frightening people behind her. She had already been terrified when she had overstepped her seat. She couldn't retreat if that person hadn't given her a strict order. She would have retreated to the bottom. So, she had no choice but to put on a look of disdain. She pushed the wine cups to the back, and gave the 3 cups to the 2 people behind her. The 2 black-robed men had been waiting impatiently for a long time. They couldn't wait any longer. They picked up the wine, and drained it in one gulp. Both of them were moved after drinking the wine. These two men were people who had tasted the best wine in the world. But they had never tasted such a good wine before. Unsatisfied, they looked at the other small cup on the table. Both of them stared at each other, unwilling to give in. According to Jun Imosie's judgment, the two black-robed men who had accompanied Princess Ling Meng were of extraordinary origins. One of them must be that person. But if that person was truly that person, then who in the entire Tianxiang Empire would be able to stand up to him as an equal? Who was the other black-robed man? The crowd that drank first seemed to have sunk into silence. After a while, a voice suddenly called out in the silence. The voice was lingering, like a moan in a spring night. It was extremely strange. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw a strong man in his 40s with an intoxicated look on his face. He stared at the small wine cup in his hand with a crazed look in his eyes. Suddenly, he raised his head and stood up, asking loudly, "It's really worthy of being a divine wine brewed by the mysterious wine god. Just a small cup is enough to make me fall head over heels for it. How much is the base price? I don't care how much it costs. I will bid for at least 10 jars today." The man who stood up was Tianxiang City's #1 salt merchant. He was also the vice president of the Tianxiang City's Chamber of Commerce, Zhao Menglong. This man's words could be said to be extremely vulgar. But no one refuted him. Instead, they all nodded in agreement. If not for the fact that they were princes and ministers, they wouldn't have been willing to speak against their conscience. Only Dugu Wudi, who was sitting in the second row, had black lines on his face. He shouted, "Sit down and talk. How can you make a fuss in such a serious environment? You've never seen the world. Do you still look like a noble?" General Dugu's heart was beating like a drum. He was very depressed. General Dugu had come today to support his third brother, Jun Wui. But his original intention was to see Jun Moxie make a fool of himself. He was determined to win the bet that day. A jar of wine for 10,000 silvers. What kind of joke is this? It would be strange if he could sell it. I'm going to win this bet no matter what. But who would have thought that 10,000 silvers for a jar of wine wouldn't seem expensive at all? Not only can it be sold, but it's also going to be sold at a much higher price. So, it's possible that the price won't be 25 million silvers. But it's going to be much more than that. How could Dugu Wudi not be depressed? Even if he had to erase his conscience, he would still have to do it. If he couldn't do it, then he would stir up trouble in the hall. General Dugu bitterly squinted his eyes and looked at the place where the uncle and nephew, Jun Moxie and Jun Wui, were sitting. Presumably, those two guys were grinning from ear to ear, right? Zhao Menglong coughed twice, and sat down in a somewhat embarrassed manner. He was one of the biggest merchants in Tianxiang City. But he didn't dare to argue with the rude and unreasonable family head. He had just sat down when he picked up the empty wine glass, raised his head, opened his mouth, and shook it twice. Then, he put it on his nose, and took a deep breath. His face was full of happiness. Dugu Wudi turned his head, and saw his precious daughter, Dugu Xiaoyi, smiling sweetly. She was looking at him with a look of schadenfreude. He couldn't help but snort and threaten, "If you keep smiling so happily, I'll start arranging a blind date tomorrow." Dugu Xiaoyi's laughter came to an abrupt end. She angrily looked at her father, and turned her head away with a straight face. But she turned back the next moment, and made a face as she said, "Humph. You're afraid of losing, aren't you? Humph. Let's see how you pay off that huge debt. But 25 million silvers. You can't even pay it off even if you sell yourself." Dugu Wudi was furious, and blurted out, "How can I pay it off? I have a way. I can't pay it off even if I sell myself. Is that amazing? If I really don't have money, then I'll use my daughter to pay off the debt. I'll take that brat as my son-in-law." Humph. Dugu Xiaoyi's pretty face turned red. She suddenly stood up, and frowned coldly, "I don't want it." "Who wants it?" She was angry and anxious. She liked June Moxie, but she didn't want to lose to June Moxie as a wager. How would her sweetheart see her if that happened? Tears welled up in her eyes. She stomped her feet and twisted her waist. She no longer paid attention to her father, and tears started to flow down her cheeks. Duguwudi was at a loss. He had long forgotten about his intention to disrupt the situation, and hurried over to comfort her. Due to the limited number of slots, only Duguing was able to enter the heroes and vanguards. He had been grinning from ear to ear, but Duguwudi had ruthlessly kicked him in the butt. "Aren't you going down?" Upstairs, Jun Wui asked his nephew. "I feel that something isn't right." Jun Moxie frowned, and pointed his finger at the sky. "It seems that that person has also come. He's not the only one. He's also brought along an unfathomable guy. I don't want to provoke unnecessary trouble, so it's better if I don't show myself." "Oh?" Jun Wui's body shook. "My feeling should be right." Jun Moxie smiled. "I'll leave today's matter to Tang Yuan and Yang Mo. I believe that the two of them will be enough. I'll only show myself at the crucial moment." Jun Wui smiled, but then frowned. "I'm afraid that your strength will spread sooner or later." We'll find out sooner or later." Jun Moxie shook his head in disapproval. "Therefore, we must make the Jun family into an undefeatable family before they find out. Then, they won't be able to do anything even if they find out. After all, only absolute strength is the strongest capital for an undefeatable family." Afterward, Song Shang wantonly praised the various wonderful aspects of the wine, and then retreated to the side. Even the young Master Jun couldn't compare to the young Master Jun when it came to understanding the taste of wine. The great wine god Song's praise had caused everyone to be reluctant to leave the wine they had just tasted. In fact, they were even more excited at this moment. The atmosphere had reached a new climax. Next, it was time for the manager, Tang Yuan, to put on a show. Now, the auction of this heavenly wine will officially begin. The starting price for each jar of wine is 10,000 taels of silver. There are no rules for increasing the price. Since the quantity of this wine is limited, each table can only bid for 50 jars at a time. There won't be any more. Tang Yuan's big belly propped up as he announced in a loud voice. "Dare I ask? Manager Tang, what do you mean by there won't be any more?" As soon as Tang Yuan's voice fell, an impatient person asked. "It doesn't mean anything special. Everyone can probably tell that this wine was made from old Song's hard work. He spent half of his life running all over the continent to collect the best quality ingredients. Even after using all of them, he was only able to brew this much. There won't be any more heavenly wine like this in the future. Therefore, this is the only time this heavenly wine will be auctioned." Tang Yuan said with a sigh. "Only this time?" The audience cried out in alarm. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. This heavenly wine is actually unique. Chapter 250. But when everyone thought about it, they felt that it made sense. How could such a rare and priceless wine be brewed so easily? Only this batch would make sense. Since it's only this time, what's the total quantity this time? The person who asked this question was out of everyone's expectations. It was Princess Raimu, who was not good at drinking and had not even tasted the wine just now. Tang Yuan looked at her in surprise, but still answered the question. "In this auction, there are a total of 3,000 jars of heaven-grade wine. No matter what the price is, such a heaven-grade wine will only be a flash in the pan in this world. One sip is one sip less, and once it's finished, it will be gone forever. 3,000 jars." Among the crowd, there were many wine lovers who exclaimed in surprise. 3,000 jars was not a small number, it could even be said to be a lot. But please do not forget that there were 100 people participating in the auction. Divided among 100 people, each person would at most have a share of 30 jars. And the limit of each person's purchase was 50 jars. Moreover, there were still the royal family and the aristocratic families in front of them. These people would definitely be the first to bid and would definitely not return empty-handed. they would probably have to go through these people before it would be their turn. But there were more than 10 of these people, and they would have to spend at least 800 jars. This meant that the remaining 80+ people would at most be able to compete for the remaining 2,200 jars. This undoubtedly meant that there would be many people who would not be able to bid for the heaven-grade wine this time. And once they failed to bid for it, they would lose the chance to taste the wine for the rest of their lives. After that, the competition between the merchants would definitely be unprecedentedly fierce. Many people secretly clenched their fists, waiting for the time to call out the price. Now, the auction officially begins. The first batch of wine, 50 jars. The winner can only be one person. Tang Yuan's fat jiggled, he was very proud. He felt that the most glorious moment of his life was holding the hammer here. I bid 1 million taels of silver for these 50 jars. Someone shouted loudly. He actually doubled the price on his first bid. This made some of the people in the back groan in their hearts. Sir, this is only the first time. You can't play it like this. If you shout like that, won't the price skyrocket when it's our turn? In the third row, the person who spoke slowly stood up. His blue robe rippled endlessly like the ocean. As he stood up, everyone seemed to see a blue ocean suddenly appear in front of them. The man smiled leisurely and said, I am the leader of the Tianxiang city's Jinyang gang, Hai Chenfeng. I have always loved wine as much as my life. Such a heavenly wine is something that I must obtain no matter what. 1 million silver taels is not a big number for anyone here. I ask everyone to give this Hai some face. This Hai thanks you in advance. Hai Chenfeng was Jun Moxie's backup. So, he was the first to stand up and accept the bombardment. Of course, there was another reason why he had stood up first. He wanted to announce that the leader of the Jinyang gang, the Tianxiang city's #1 gang, had changed hands. Moreover, Haida gang's leader had officially entered the upper echelons of the Tianxiang Empire. Hai Chenfeng's appearance instantly attracted the attention of many people. It was as if a magnet had met a block of iron, and they were glued to his body. Hai Chenfeng's body was as motionless as a mountain, but his complexion was somewhat unhealthy and pale. Jun Xia couldn't help but feel somewhat puzzled as he watched the show from upstairs. Could it be that this Sky Xian expert has suffered another serious injury in just a couple of days? Isn't this too frequent? It seems that I'll have to teach him a lesson. At the very least, I'll have to raise his strength by 1 or 2 levels. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease. Only Jun Xia would dare to say such a thing. Who would believe that he could casually raise the strength of a Tian Xian expert by 1 or 2 levels? The 3 princes and the aristocratic families began to pay attention to this matter. Everyone knew that the Tianxiang city's Jinyang gang's leader had changed hands. However, no one had expected that it would turn out to be such an unfathomable Tian Xian expert. Shen Xian experts had always thought highly of themselves, and rarely interfered in the affairs of the mortal world. But, Shen Xian was second only to Tian Xian, and was considered to be the continent's strongest force. The Tang family was one of the largest families in the Tianxiang city. However, the strongest member of the family was only at the peak of the Earth Xian realm. And, a Tian Xian expert had unexpectedly become the leader of a Jianghu gang. Even if this Jianghu gang was the so-called Tianxiang city's #1 underworld gang, it was still too unimaginable. However, because of his status as a Tian Xian expert, it was reasonable for him to let go of the 50 jars of wine. So, no one participated in the bidding for a while. Just as the dust was about to settle, a young man dressed in black leisurely stood up from the second row. His face was covered with a veil, but his temperament was calm and elegant. His every movement made people feel particularly comfortable. It seemed as if all the elegance in the world could be found in him, and could even be used as a textbook example. That young man dressed in black was the eldest son of the Li family, Li Yuran. This was the first time in many years that Li Yuran had appeared in such a formal public occasion. I bid 1.5 million taels. Li Yuran's smiling voice was like an autumn breeze passing through the woods, without the slightest hint of anger. This is the first auction of such a heavenly wine, It's of great significance. This young master is also intoxicated with this wine. Please forgive me, gang leader Hai. Li Yuan looked at Hai Chen-feng with a smile on her face. It seemed as if she was appreciating him very much. However, she didn't reveal any of her true feelings. The night before yesterday, her two senior brothers had gone out for the first time, but had returned with serious injuries. And the one who had done this was the new gang leader of the Jinyang gang. Although it was said that both sides had suffered heavy losses, how could Li Yuan allow Hai Chen-feng to win the auction in such a satisfactory manner? Moreover, her senior brother was standing behind her. Li Yuan's plan was to disrupt Hai Chen-feng's momentum, and also to test the financial strength of the Jinyang gang and the other underground gangs. After all, in this world, one could easily spend millions of taels of silver. If Hai Chen-feng was a brave man, and kept bidding, then Li Yuan would be able to seize the opportunity to withdraw. Then, the new gang leader of the Jinyang gang would lose a lot of money, and this could be considered as a small revenge for her two senior brothers. So young Master Li is also a wine enthusiast? Hai Chen-feng chuckled, that doesn't matter. It's a natural selection, and the highest bidder wins. Since that's the case, I will increase the price a little more. 3 million. Hai Chen-feng had never cared about money. Moreover, the Jinyang gang was earning money for Jun Moxie. So, no matter what price Li Yuan could offer, Hai Chen-feng would be able to match it. However, at a certain point, the current price that Li Yuan had offered wasn't too high. In fact, he was afraid that no one would dare to bid against her. However, it wasn't worth it to transfer the money to him. So, he naturally had to increase the price a little more, or even double it. 3 million taels. Although the people present were all tyrants, and although 3 million taels was not a small amount, it wasn't enough to attract their attention. However, using 3 million taels to buy 50 bottles of wine at a price of 60,000 taels of silver per bottle was a little too extravagant. An underground gang is indeed an underground gang, they treat money like dirt. Gang leader Hai is really rich and overbearing. Li Yuan smiled leisurely. Her eyes were as intoxicating as spring water. In that case, this young master will offer 3 million taels and 1 copper, 3 million taels and 1 copper. Such a bid was a naked insult to anyone. Hai Chen-feng was furious. His body exuded a powerful aura like that of a rising tide. Lang Lang looked at Li Yuan and said, young Master Li is really rich. 3 million taels and 1 copper, hee hee. For the sake of my heart, I will not hesitate to pay 5 million taels. This time, Hai Chen-feng was really angry. This Li family brat was really too infuriating. It would have been fine if you had just increased the price, but you've actually increased the price by 1 copper. This is too unreasonable. You really deserve to die. At this moment, he had already made up his mind to fight with Li Yuan to the bitter end. This was a matter of dignity. Didn't gang leader Hai just say that it's natural selection, and that the highest bidder wins? Why are you so angry? That's not good, hee hee, Li Yuan said in a light and breezy manner, since the owner of this place calls everyone a noble, it's only proper for you to act like a gentleman. This young master was only bidding for the wine, and it doesn't seem to be a violation of the rules. Besides, there are no rules for increasing the price. Our Li family is a small family, and can't afford to increase the price too much. Please forgive us, but since gang leader Hai has an opinion, I will increase the price a little more, lest gang leader Hai becomes unhappy. Hai Chen-feng's complexion was still ashen, but his heart was overjoyed. He thought to himself, if you increase the price a little more, I will immediately stop. I will let you bear the blame, and pay for it yourself. Li Yuan paused for a moment, and then finally opened her mouth. I bid 5 million taels and 2 copper. Hai Chen-feng flew into a rage. He jumped onto the table, and roared, you little brat, you're going too far, Suddenly, he heard Jun Moxie's soft voice, give it to him. Hai Chen-feng was startled, and subconsciously looked around. There was no secret technique in the Xian continent, and Hai Chen-feng didn't know where this voice had come from. Why didn't anyone seem to have heard it? This is too strange, isn't it? I said, give it to him. Don't bid again, this is an order. Jun Moxie's voice resounded in his ears once again. Although the voice was soft, it was extremely strict, and was filled with an order that couldn't be disobeyed. Yes, it was an order. Jun Moxie noticed Li Yuran as soon as he stepped forward. This was the first time that Jun Moxie had seen Li Yuran since he had crossed over to this world. Jun Moxie felt a strange sense of discomfort at first glance. Li Yuran's demeanor, manner of speech, and each and every one of her movements were perfect. No matter which aspect it was impeccable, it was perfect to the extreme. However, was there really such a perfect person in this world? Jun Moxie had never believed it. The world was incomplete, and there was no such thing as perfection in this world. Therefore, perfection didn't exist in any world. Even if Li Yuran's performance was perfect, Jun Dashao could feel one word at first glance: fake. Chapter 251. It could be said that Li Yuran was advancing step by step in order to force Hai Chen-feng into a dead end. Hai Chen-feng was a strong Tian Xian expert, and had a calm temperament. But, he had been provoked to this extent by a few words. This Li Yuran's schemes were as deep as the sea. She was indeed a great enemy. Jun Moxie was almost certain that Li Yuran wouldn't be able to bid again if Hai Chen-feng were to blindly increase the price again. After all, if one were to put oneself in someone else's shoes, it would be enough for him to force himself to this point, and he would also take this opportunity to stop. But Li Yuran, your plan is admittedly very good. Unfortunately, you're too lucky. You've met Hai Chen-feng, and Hai Chen-feng has my back. You're doomed to fall for this trick of yours. But, you can't get away with it here. You're too good at it. Therefore, Jun Moxie made a prompt decision to stop Hai Chen-feng's impulsive behavior. Ha ha ha. Hai Chen-feng was an experienced man. Although he had been provoked by Li Yuran, and had become impulsive for a moment, but he had come to his senses after Jun Moxie's warning. He was sitting on the table at this time, and it could be said that he was in an awkward position. This was not befitting of his status as a Sky Xian expert. However, Hai Chen-feng suddenly burst into laughter and said, "The Li family is indeed worthy of being called one of the great families of the Tianxiang city. They are truly rich and overbearing." Ha ha, I'm just a small gang. How could I provoke the imperial tutor's mansion? Since young Master Li is so determined to win, and there are more than 50 bottles of this wine, I'll give young Master Li face, and withdraw from this bidding. Then, he leisurely walked down from the table, and cupped his hands towards Li Yuran. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he said with a faint smile, "Young Master Li is indeed a wine lover. You've won the first round of wine as you wished. Congratulations." With just a few words, he had completely turned the entire awkward situation around. It was really sharp. Li Yuran was instantly dumbfounded. No one knew that a trace of bewilderment and suspicion had revealed itself for the first time under his veil. His face had always been as calm as an ancient well. Li Yuran was very puzzled. He had never expected that Hai Chen-feng, the leader of the Jinyang gang, would suddenly retreat at such a critical juncture. He had obviously fallen into his trap. Judging from his excitement, he was afraid that the next bid would be 10 million taels of silver. So, why would he suddenly retreat at such a critical juncture? I want wine. What a joke. Of course, I wanted this wine, but anyone with a discerning eye would know that everyone in the first 2 rows would definitely have wine. In fact, I didn't even have to pay a high price. I could just buy it at the lowest price. Was it worthwhile for me to spend 5 million taels of silver on a few jars of wine? For the first time, Li Yuran felt that something was not going according to her plan. However, Hai Chen-feng's anger couldn't have been faked. So, what's going on here? Did he rein in at the brink of a precipice? Not only did he withdraw from this meaningless competition, but he had also smashed his own foot with a rock. He had even given himself the reputation of a bully. Hai Chen-feng doesn't seem to have such knowledge, does he? Could it be that there was an expert guiding him from behind the scenes? However, even if there is someone behind him, this matter has happened so suddenly. I only had a moment to spare. What method could he have used to pass on this information? This is really puzzling. Li Yuran was in a daze for only a moment. Then, he smiled sincerely. He cupped his hands and said, "If that's the case, thank you for letting me win, Gang Leader Hai." Li Yuran was in a daze for only a moment. He smiled sincerely, cupped his hands, and said, "If that's the case, thank you, Gang Leader Hai." He chuckled twice and said in a self-deprecating manner, "It can be said that this young master has smashed his own foot with a rock. I wanted to play some dirty tricks, but Gang Leader Hai easily saw through them." Yuran admired Gang Leader Hai's intelligence. "I will consult Gang Leader Hai's wisdom if I have the opportunity in the future." June Moxie couldn't help but sigh from upstairs. This Li Yuran's way of handling things is really flawless. A discerning person could see that Li Yuran was deliberately stirring up trouble by raising the price. It was clear that she wanted to embarrass Hai Chen-feng. However, Li Yuran had fallen into a disadvantageous position at this moment. Moreover, she had taken out a sky-high price of 5 million silver taels to buy the 50 jars of wine. Everyone was somewhat ridiculing her in their hearts. However, Li Yuran's words had made it seem as if she was open and aboveboard. Daring to take responsibility for one's actions, and smiling in the face of failure. This required courage and tolerance. The two black-robed men behind Princess Raimu looked at each other with appreciation in their eyes. Picking up and letting go, this Li Yuran is quite a character. There are very few people in the younger generation who can compare to her. Mr. Wen smiled and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, won't you consider this talent?" The other black-robed man was the current emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. He had a profound look in his eyes as he also spoke in a low voice, "It is indeed worth considering. However, the person who is guiding Hai Chen-feng behind his back is even more worthy of my consideration. Not only is he able to guide Hai Chen-feng without leaving a trace, but his wisdom is also not inferior to that of Li Yuran. In fact, it is very likely that he is even better than her." Guiding him behind his back? Mr. Wen was puzzled. "Mr. Wen, think about it. Li Yuran has set up a trap for Hai Chen-feng in just a few words. Moreover, it is a dangerous trap that he will inevitably step into." He knew that Hai Chen-feng would certainly follow up the first time he increased the price by 500,000 taels, but the second time he increased the price by only a single copper. This left Hai Chen-feng with no way out, and he flew into a rage and lost his sense of propriety. The third time he increased the price, he only increased it by 2 coppers. It could be said that Hai Chen-feng was unable to restrain his anger at that time. He didn't think about anything else. He was like a blindfolded mad bull, and could only rush forward. Even if the opposite side was a thick wall that was difficult to break through, he would still recklessly rush forward. Mr. Wen closed his eyes, and recalled everything that had happened. And, he realized that this was indeed the case. Hai Chen-feng was an expert of the Tianxian Empire. But, he had jumped onto the table without any regard for his image. He was extremely angry, and was ready to explode at any time. But, he only said 8 words after he jumped onto the table, "You're going too far, boy." Then, he suddenly stopped. He shouldn't have stopped at this point. It was as if a mighty river had suddenly been cut off at the waist. Then, he calmly cupped his hands and admitted defeat. Moreover, he retaliated with an exceptionally beautiful counterattack. It can even be said that this was a great counterattack. You see, that boy, Li Yuran, is also looking around. I reckon that he has the same suspicions as me. It's just that no one is able to discern what kind of method that person used to instruct Hai Chen-feng. That's why I said that the person behind Hai Chen-feng is very powerful, whether it's his wisdom, or his unique methods. The emperor smiled. Mr. Wen looked, and realized that this was indeed the case. Li Yuran hadn't been deliberately looking around, but he had been intentionally or unintentionally spying on his surroundings. So, he hadn't been able to conceal his movements from Mr. Wen's eyes. The Emperor's eyes shone with a wise and far-sighted light. "Old Wen, even you and I wouldn't have been able to control our emotions when Hai Chen-feng had been humiliated. So, we wouldn't have been able to think too much about it. Therefore, I concluded that Hai Chen-feng had been stopped by someone at that time. And, the person who had stopped him had chosen the most appropriate time to make Li Yuran suffer a big loss. This person is perhaps the biggest reason why Hai Chen-feng suddenly decided to take over the Jinyang gang. I seem to remember that the original leader of the Jinyang gang was called Jin Feng Lai, right? The emperor was the ruler of a country, and yet he was able to remember the name of the leader of an underground gang. It could be said that this emperor was very valiant. I also suspect that this person may be the real organizer of today's auction." A cold look appeared in the emperor's eyes. "Therefore, we can certainly get some information about this person as long as we keep an eye on Hai Chen-feng." Mr. Wen looked at Hai Chen-feng, and his eyes flashed as he said, "If this doesn't work, then this old man will capture Hai Chen-feng and interrogate him in detail. Even if he has a head of copper and arms of iron, this old man will still squeeze the oil out of him." This Mr. Wen's tone was very big. Hai Chen-feng was a mid-level Tianxian expert, and was considered a very powerful person in this world. But this old man was saying that he would capture him and slowly interrogate him. Hai Chen-feng is the disciple of the Azure Master. The emperor smiled faintly. "We shouldn't provoke the Azure Master. The gains don't make up for the losses." He leisurely looked at Tang Yuan, who was on the stage, and said, "As for finding this person, there are actually many, many ways." Li Yuran handed over 5 million silver taels under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Then, one of her attendants followed the aristocratic hall's people to arrange for the wine. She then sat down in a calm and composed manner. This Li Yuran is a very frightening person. Jun Dashao stared at Li Yuran downstairs, and came to a conclusion about him. His intuition told him that this guy was a very big threat. Jun Moxie's instincts as the #1 assassin in his previous life had taught him that he would never allow anyone to pose a threat to him. Especially when it came to something that could threaten his life, Jun Imosie's first thought was to destroy it. Jun Wui looked at him with a smile, and intentionally or unintentionally said, "Li Yuran is the eldest grandson of the Grand Preceptor. He is also the leader of the younger generation of the Li family, the Meng family, and several other small families. He never attends this kind of occasion. Mosie's presence here is more important than the Grand Preceptor Li Shang's presence. I don't care about his face. It doesn't matter to me whether his face is bigger than his ass or not. In fact, it's meaningless to me." Jun Mosie smiled. "What I really care about is how much money he spent on us." Even though he said this, his eyes were flashing. "I must put Li Yuran in my line of sight." The hitman Jun secretly made a decision. The first batch of 50 bottles of wine was unexpectedly sold at a sky-high price of 5 million silver taels. The shopkeeper, Tang Yuan, was very excited, and quickly delivered the second batch of 50 bottles. "I bid 1 million silver taels for these 50 bottles. I don't know if anyone wants to increase the price." Hai Chen-feng stood up. He was very competent in his role as a supporter. Of course, it was reasonable for him to bid. On the contrary, it would be unreasonable for him to give up just like that. Chapter 252. These people didn't notice the reluctance in Princess Raima's eyes. The eyes of the black-robed man behind him shone brightly as he looked at the wine. "Since the princess has bid, then I won't bid anymore. I'll buy the next batch. I can't possibly be unable to keep up with the next batch, right?" Hai Chen-feng smiled in a very gentlemanly manner. "Now, for the second batch of wine, Princess Raimu has bid 1,500,000 taels. Is there a higher bid? Is there a higher bid? 1,500,000 going once, 1,500,000 going twice, 1,500,000 going thrice, sold." Bang! The hammer was hammered down. Fatty Tang was very excited. He loved the feeling of hammered down to his heart's content. June Moxie was smiling from upstairs. This fatty is really making me speechless. He's actually shouting that Princess Raimo is getting married. Jun Wui spat out a mouthful of tea and coughed twice. Jun Wui had discovered one thing. No matter what it was, as long as it came out of Jun Dashao's mouth, it would have a completely different flavor. Fatty had clearly shouted bid a moment ago. Wait a minute, bidding and getting married, it really doesn't seem to make a difference. Bah! How did I get tricked by this brat? The third batch of wine was brought out. The crown prince opened his mouth. This prince is very fond of this wine. 600,000 taels for this batch of wine. On the stage, Fatty Tang rolled his eyes. I really want to spit on your face. The first batch was 5 million. The second batch was 1,500,000. And you're only offering a price that's a little higher than the base price. Moreover, your tone isn't that of an auction. What do you mean by 600,000 taels for this batch of wine? This is a blatant warning, don't compete with me, I'm the crown prince. How shameless. After the first prince finished speaking, he turned around with a smile and said, Is there anyone else who wants to make a bid? It doesn't matter. This is an auction, and the highest bidder wins. Everyone, don't worry. I won't mind. Everyone's faces twitched as they cursed in their hearts. You call this not caring? Did he have to say, whoever bids, I'll kill him? Does that count as minding? Tang Yuan hadn't yet spoken when Hai Chen Feng stood up with a whooshed sound. He coughed twice, cleared his throat and said, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, has spoken well. The highest bidder wins. I will bid 1 million silver taels for this round of wine. Oh? The Crown Prince looked at him with a smile and said, Gang leader Hai is very courageous. In that case, this prince will bid 1.5 million silver taels. Hai Chen Feng hesitated for a moment. It seemed as if he wanted to increase the price again, but he eventually sat down. Hai Chen Feng continued to bid for the next 16 batches of wine, but was unable to buy any of them. 1,500,000 taels had actually become the fixed price. These 16 batches of fine wine were all bought by the aristocratic families for 1,500,000 taels of silver. In the blink of an eye, 900 of the 3,000 bottles of wine had already been lost. The people who had been left behind didn't even have the opportunity to bid. Of course, they didn't dare to bid either. They couldn't help but scratch their cheeks in anxiety. There wasn't much wine left. Great General Dugu Wudi's face had already turned the color of charcoal. He was finished this time. These 900 bottles of wine had already been sold for a high price of 32 million silver taels. This was far more than what Jun Moxie had said that day. That was 25 million silver taels for each bottle. And there were still more than 2,000 bottles left. The most conservative estimate was that this auction would fetch an astronomical figure of 70 million silver taels at the very least. And this number, he had to owe. This was simply a crushing debt. The Dugu family was big. But, where would they find 70 million silver taels? It wouldn't be enough even if they sold it all. Would they really have to use their daughter to pay off the debt? What should they do? Could they really use their daughter to pay off the debt? They could only ponder over this in their hearts. Wouldn't the Dugu family become the biggest joke in the entire Tianxiang Empire if they really did that? They couldn't even pay off the debt of wine. And, they had to use their daughter as a daughter-in-law in order to erase the debt, alas. Dugu Wudi heaved a long sigh. He was extremely worried. I shouldn't have made that bet. I especially shouldn't have added that sentence, compensate according to the auction price. I dug a pit for myself and jumped into it. But, I ended up getting buried instead. It was supposed to be 25 million silver taels. But, the lowest transaction price was 1,500,000 silver taels. In other words, it was 30,000 silver taels per bottle. So, It would be 75 million silver taels in my family's hands. And this was the lowest possible price. Not to mention me, even the entire Dugu family wouldn't be able to come up with such a sum of money. This is really killing me. The eldest young master Tang Yuan was on the stage. He was so excited that his throat had become hoarse. But he was still making a big fuss. The nobles, ministers, and rich people in the audience also opened their mouths wide to shout out the price. Each of their voices was louder than the last. It seemed as if they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to afford it. The eldest young master Tang was also very mischievous. He continued to bring out 50 bottles at a time. He wouldn't bring out one more or one less. Everyone was afraid that they wouldn't be able to buy it. They were afraid that they would lose their status as nobles if they went out. This stimulated everyone's desire to buy even more. The bidding process became even faster and smoother. Everyone was striving to outdo each other. And the price seemed to be getting higher and higher as time went on. Hai Chen-feng's shill had become useless in the end. It seemed as if everyone present had become Jun Dashao's shill. As soon as one person shouted, "I bid 1,000,000, 5 or 6 people would immediately shout, "I bid 1,500,000. It seemed as if the long-cherished wish of the Jinyang gang's new leader hadn't been fulfilled. However, this was a story for another time. Jun Moxie had originally intended to sell the wine for 10,000 taels. But the price had been forcibly raised to 30,000 taels. And the upper limit of the price hadn't been set yet. However, the supply still couldn't meet the demand at this price. In fact, it was likely that the price would have been several times more popular if it weren't for the fact that there was a one-time limit. The auction was finally coming to an end after several rounds of frantic bidding. 2,700 of the 3,000 bottles of wine had been successfully auctioned off. Only 300 bottles of wine remained. However, there was still a small number of people who hadn't managed to bid for them. It was worth mentioning that Hai Chen-feng, the leader of the Hai gang, hadn't been able to fulfill his long-cherished wish. So, he once again shouted, "I bid 1,000,000. Wait a moment. This prince has something to say." Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. Everyone looked towards the source of the shout and saw the third prince rushing up to the auction stage. He directly snatched the hammer from Tang Yuan's hands, and with 3 banging sounds, he forcefully hit the table a few times. Everyone was still preparing to compete for the last part of the wine. But they were surprised to see the third prince suddenly making such a move. They couldn't help but feel surprised. So, they immediately quieted down. Nobody knew what the third prince was planning to do. Someone else is in the middle of an auction and you're a prince? Do you want to be the auctioneer? Everyone, listen to me. The third prince stood on the stage with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at everyone condescendingly. His attitude was indescribably arrogant. Today, we've been fortunate enough to taste this wine. This is the fortune of 3 lifetimes. So, we naturally want to thank the shareholders of the aristocratic hall. Here, this king expresses his sincerest gratitude. The third prince looked at Tang Yuan and nodded. Then, he changed the subject. "This wine is undoubtedly an exceptional treasure. But, we still need to understand basic etiquette. This prince is ashamed." The third prince pretended to sigh. "I just remembered that there's one person in our Tianxiang Empire. He's the most qualified person to taste this wine. But, he's not here. He's working his heart out for the sake of the country and the common people." The nobles who were able to enter this place weren't people who didn't understand the situation. So, everyone's hearts became clear. How could they not understand what the third prince was trying to do? He was trying to use the tiger's skin as a banner to intimidate others. This person is naturally this prince's father. Our Tianxiang Empire's monarch, His Majesty the Emperor. Father is busy with the affairs of the country. So, he couldn't come here in person. But, don't tell me that we can't be filial to him. Don't tell me that we're going to disregard the country for our own selfish desires. The third prince's voice gradually became stern. Such a disrespectful act is a heinous crime. The auction is coming to an end. There are only 300 jars of wine left. This prince suggests that we offer all of this fine wine to our beloved emperor. What do you all think? The third prince's voluminous speech was met with absolute silence. Everyone had thought that the third prince would jump out at this time to try to obtain the remaining wine. But they hadn't expected that the third prince's face would be so thick. Listening to his words, it was clear that he wanted to stop the auction. Then, the aristocratic hall would give away the wine without asking for a single cent. The wine was provided by the aristocratic hall, and the favor was his. Wasn't he the one who suggested it? Everyone was cursing in their hearts. You want to be filial to your father? You should have bought it and given it to him. Didn't you bid for 50 jars yourself? How come I don't see you being filial to your father? Now, you want to take someone else's things and give them to them as a favor? It had to be said that this was also a kind of skill. It was a great skill to invert black and white. It was a great skill to mix right and wrong. Everyone was dissatisfied in their hearts. But they didn't say anything. Those who didn't manage to buy the wine felt indignant. But these people were considered to be the lowest of the low. They had a lot of money, but they lacked a backer. So, who would dare to offend the emperor's son? Moreover, raising an objection would be tantamount to being accused of disrespect. No one was willing to say anything. Everyone's eyes were focused on Tang Yuan. They wanted to see how the aristocratic hall's head shopkeeper would respond. Head shopkeeper Tang, what do you think? The third prince asked in a deep voice. Strongly recommended Dongfang Xuanhuan book, Endless Sword Outfit. Book number, 1600879. There was a direct train on the page to get there. This is another masterpiece of the Xuanhuan god, GMO. Everyone who has read the books, Emperor's Heart and Alien Swordsman, will surely remember his name, right? I believe that this book won't disappoint you. Chapter 253. Today's third update. Fourth update, seeking monthly votes. This Tang's shares in the aristocratic hall are my private savings. They have nothing to do with the Tang family. I have no objection to the third prince's wish to present them to the emperor. However, this Tang cannot afford to make a loss. How about this? Out of these 300 jars, this Tang has 100 jars. If the third prince is interested, you can purchase them at the lowest price in this auction. As for the remaining 200 jars, I have no opinion on how the third prince wishes to dispose of them. The third prince's voice was stern, but Fatty didn't care about him. He was giving the third prince face by not cursing at such a despicable person. In fact, Fatty would have exploded if he hadn't received the young Master Jun's telepathic instructions. Jun Mo Xia had used the secret sound transmission technique to transmit Tang Yuan's words to his ears. Therefore, Fatty Tang had listened and learned each sentence at a time. Therefore, he had spoken very slowly. The third prince thought for a moment. Buy them at the lowest price? 100 bottles would cost 3 million taels of silver. I don't have that kind of spare cash. Fatty may be a commoner, but he has the entire Tang family behind him. Old Master Tang and my imperial father are good friends. So, I may not be able to gain any advantage in the end if I were to fight with Fatty. Forget it. 200 bottles is a lot. Therefore, I don't want to cause trouble for Tang Yuan even though I'm angry that he doesn't know how to appreciate favors. The third prince laughed heartily and said, "That's great. Since the head manager has no objection to the remaining 200 bottles of wine, then someone come and load the remaining 200 bottles into the carriage. This prince wants to send a big gift to my imperial father. I will certainly report the credit to the aristocratic hall." "Your Highness, are you singing a one-man show?" A sloppy and lazy voice came from upstairs. Everyone looked up, and saw that young Master Jun's clothes were unbuttoned. His handsome face had an angry look on it. One of his feet was on the railing, and his legs were almost at a 90-degree angle. He was looking at the third prince with a sneer on his face. But what does June Sunshao mean? How did this prince put on an opera? The third prince's face immediately darkened. What do you mean? I just want to tell the third prince that your one-man show is not good at all. June Moxie mischievously laughed. Fatty Tang is only the shopkeeper of the aristocratic hall. This young master is the big boss of the aristocratic hall. Among these 300 jars of wine, there are still 100 jars for this young master. Today, I want to see who exactly is it that can move away from me without spending money. If you want to move it away, sure, but you have to buy it at the highest price so far. Don't even think about moving it. Let's see which grandson dares to touch this grandfather's things. June Moxie had changed the way he addressed himself 5 times in just a few sentences. From this young master, then this young master, then this old master, and finally this grandfather. He didn't even leave the slightest bit of face for the emperor's own son. This brat is really fucking crazy. Dugu Woody's spirit shook as he said to his daughter, "How come I didn't realize that this brat has such courage? Motherfucker, these words make me feel good. Since when did this happen? It's really rare. He's worthy of being Big Brother June's son. The father is a hero, and the son is a true man. He has such courage." Dugu Woody's heart was somewhat moved. June Moxie's words seemed to have come out of his head without even thinking. But this also required courage. His 7 sons wouldn't dare to say such words even if they were beaten to death. But June Moxie dared. It didn't matter whether he was brainless or not. But he was stronger than his own son and nephew. This brat is going to have to eat his head. How can such words be spoken so casually? Don't say that you brat said it. Even this great general wouldn't have a good time if he had said it. Father, can't you stop cursing when you speak? Can't you be a bit more refined when you speak? That's a bit like an aristocrat. Dugu Xiaoyi snorted and coquettishly glared at her father. She felt that her father's vulgar words were a bit degrading. Then, she played with her fingers and said shyly, "Father, I love watching Big Brother Mo Xia act like a hoodlum. Look at him, he's so handsome. That temperament is simply too elegant. The legendary magnanimity is probably nothing more than this." What? Great General Dugu Woody was completely speechless. Is there still justice in this world? My father is already dissatisfied with a curse word. And now, this brat is acting like a hoodlum and acting like a hoodlum. But, he's called handsome. What magnanimity? Nothing more than this. What's with this? How can it be related to this? I may not have studied for many days, but I roughly know what that word means. What does it mean? Even Panin and Song Yu are in the eyes of the beholder. But, it can't be so outrageous. The difference in treatment between people is too big, isn't it? My daughter's elbow is twisting so much that it's almost behind her head. What does June Sunshao mean? Don't tell me that you're not willing to give even a jug of wine to Imperial Father. Don't tell me that in June Sunshao's eyes, Imperial Father's concern for the country and its people isn't even worthy of a jug of wine from you. Ha! The third prince looked coldly at June Moxie. However, he was below him, and June Dashao was above him. So, even if the third prince's gaze was fierce, he would still have to look up to the hitman. I don't mean anything. I'm doing business here, not a charity. I can't let anyone bully me. Hitman June didn't care about the third prince's ominous glare. He snorted coldly and said, "I'd like to ask the third prince what you mean by this." Fatty Tang said that he didn't want to buy his shares. So, you don't want to touch them. But, you want to dispose of the wine under my name? I don't know if the third prince thinks that I, June Moxie, am easy to bully. Or do you think that my June family is easy to bully? I'm sure that everyone here is well aware of who's the one who's being so outrageous. As the saying goes, right and wrong will be judged by the public, and justice is in the hearts of the people. This young master will definitely demand an explanation from His Highness the Third Prince for today's matter. Jun Dashao raised his head and said in a fierce voice, "My Jun family would rather break than bend. We'll endure hundreds of tribulations without yielding. The Third Prince has humiliated my Jun family in front of so many people for no reason at all. And, these hundreds of people are witnesses to this. How can I endure such a situation?" Jun Moxie's voice was filled with grief and indignation. "My pitiful Jun family is full of martyrs. My grandfather, Jun Zhantian, fought for the country for his entire life. My father and second uncle died on the battlefield. Not even their bones were left. My third uncle died on the battlefield. He was crippled for life. My two elder brothers also sacrificed their lives for the country and died young. My entire family drank blood from the blade. They slept in the saddle. They worked hard until their death. Now, the Jun family's talents have withered. It's desolate. Yet, you come to our door and humiliate us. Where's the justice in this? Dare I ask the Third Prince, what's the meaning of this? Could it be that once the cunning rabbit is killed, the hound is cooked? Your Highness, won't your actions disappoint all the meritorious officials? You're so tyrannical just for a jar of wine. You're humiliating the entire family of meritorious officials. Furthermore, you're using His Majesty's name to act all high and mighty, like a fox exploiting the tiger's might, doing whatever you want. You! What are your intentions? Who's the one who's guilty of heinous crimes?" Young Master Jun's Great Black Walk technique had clearly risen to an even more profound level. It could be said to have reached the acme of perfection, the realm of divinity. As soon as he opened his mouth, he went straight to the point and casually pinned the blame on the Third Prince. The Third Prince was no match for him. The Third Prince's face had turned purple. He was gasping for breath. No matter how he answered, it would be wrong. For a moment, he didn't dare to reply. "My Jun family has been wronged." Jun Dashao's voice was long and trembling. He sobbed and choked with resentment. Then, he looked up to the sky and sighed. The expression on his face was like that of Qin Xianglian, who had been abandoned by Qin Shimi, and was finally standing in the Hall of Justice Bao. His voice was mournful, causing those who heard it to feel grief in their hearts. If the heavens were to know of such injustice, it would simply be able to shake the winter thunder and shake the summer rain and frost, and even the flying snow in June would be unable to suppress the injustice. The Third Prince was completely dumbfounded. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Below, everyone was dumbfounded. This Jun Dashao is too good at talking. He really dared to say anything. It was too terrifying to go on the line. They had seen the Third Prince distort black and white. He was tyrannical and tyrannical. They had thought that he was the best. But compared to Jun Dashao, there wasn't even a speck of dust left. They weren't even on the same level. This person was truly a top-notch expert who could distort black and white, confuse right and wrong, distort the truth, and create something out of nothing. Dugu Wudi burst into laughter. But, his laughter hadn't even left his mouth when Dugu Xiaoyi quickly covered his mouth. It would have been a big deal if he had laughed. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart was thumping. She had only cared about covering his mouth. But, she hadn't noticed that she had choked her father's breath. Dugu Wudi pulled his daughter's hand away. He panted and coughed fiercely. Then, he cursed in a low voice, "You little girl. Do you want to murder your father?" The two black-robed men behind Princess Raimu were real experts. But, it was a pity that their extraordinary willpower had been rendered useless. Both of them were flabbergasted. They looked at Jun Dashao, who was covered in tears and snot. Both of them felt ashamed of their inferiority. This guy's skin is so thick that it surpasses the ancients and dazzles the contemporaries. I'm no match for him. The Third Prince panted for a long time. Then, he finally managed to catch his breath. His eyes seemed to be spewing fire. He gritted his teeth and said, "If that's the case, this prince will leave these 100 jars for you. Then, there shouldn't be a problem with the last 100 jars, right? That's none of my business. As for the last 100 jars, you don't need to ask me. Jun Moxie's expression changed instantly. He acted as if this matter had nothing to do with him. That's the shares of the prince equivalent son, Yang Imo. What does it have to do with me? Humph. Add fuel to the fire. Bully, Yang Imo. Come out. The third prince was flustered and exasperated. He was anxious to save his face. So, he shouted. Everyone shook their heads. He's a prince, but he doesn't have any poise to this extent. It's a disgrace. What do you want? Little Yang Imo trembled as he poked his head out from upstairs. Are you willing to offer the 100 jars of wine under your name to your uncle? The third Prince Lenglang stared at him and asked in an imposing manner. Chapter 254. Yang Mo's eyes flashed with anger. As a prince, you can't even deal with two young masters of aristocratic families, and you only want to bully a child like me to save face? What kind of ability is this? Bah! Although the Prince of Equality was the only prince of the previous generation, his situation was indeed very awkward. Jun Moxie and Tang Yuan could say no, but if Yang Imo also said no, then this matter would really become a big one. This would become an internal dispute of the royal family. Third. Your Highness, please make the decision. Yang Imo bit his lips and said in a low voice. Below the stage, the black-robed man behind Princess Rima's eyes flashed with a cold light. He looked at the third prince, and then at the second prince and the eldest prince, who were watching the show from the side. He closed his eyes slightly, and suddenly let out a long sigh, feeling only infinite sorrow and loneliness. These are my sons. My 3 sons, my successors whom I have been working hard to cultivate, and the future monarch of the Tianxiang Empire. I have always wanted them to understand that the throne must be fought for, and sacrifices must be made. There will naturally be winners, and there will be losers. But in any case, the meat will rot in the pot, and no matter how tragic you are, the result will be decided by the 3 of you brothers. One will be the emperor, and the other 2 will support him. Therefore, I have never given any opinion on your fight. But, it is only limited to the 3 of you, and must not involve other things. At the very least, you must unite against outsiders, because you are all brothers born from the same mother. Blood is thicker than water. But now, the third prince had used his status as a prince to bully a member of the imperial family. That member of the imperial family was their little brother, and had made a fool of himself in front of everyone. But the eldest and the second prince had ignored him, and were just watching from the side. Earlier, when the second prince had made a fool of himself at the door, the eldest and the third prince had also been watching from the side. The eldest brother had disregarded his status during the auction of the wine, and had competed with Hai Chen-feng, the leader of an underground gang. The second brother and the third brother had also added fuel to the fire, and were eager to see the world in chaos. Now that third brother had jumped out to do such a shameless thing, not only did eldest brother and third brother have to watch coldly from the sidelines, but the advisors beside them also seemed to be thinking about how to use this matter to attack third brother. Did brothers really have to be like this? His Majesty the Emperor was sure that by tonight at the latest, the first prince and the second prince's impeachment of the third prince would be placed on his desk. As for the content inside, he didn't even need to look at it to know. Back then. Why? Didn't I treat royal brother Huainong peacefully and respectfully until now? Why can't you 3 beasts follow his example? Where's royal brother Huainong? Then wouldn't little Yang Imo be exactly like Huainong's younger brother back in the day? The image of little Yang Imo full of grievances, but with no way to complain, flashed across the emperor's mind. His heart was filled with emotion. Is this really brotherly respect? If royal brother Huainong hadn't given up on competing with me for the throne, would we really be brotherly respect each other? Could it be that there's really no kin in the royal family? His Majesty the Emperor sighed tiredly. he suddenly felt bored to death. His brain, which was usually full of strange ideas, was now as muddled as a paste. Boring. Really boring. If it wasn't for the fact that he had been carried away by a sudden impulse to see who the mysterious mastermind behind the scenes was, and had coincidentally come here, he probably wouldn't have known that the three brothers were like fire and water. He had always known that they had their own problems, and weren't very harmonious. But when the three of them were in front of him, they had always behaved in a brotherly manner. The eldest was steady, the second quick-witted, and the third was simple and honest. He had always thought that they were just like xie jiabao trees, occasionally having yellow leaves, handsome horses. Small flaws are unavoidable. But now he knew that everything he had seen was almost all an illusion. How could it be yellow leaves? How could it be small flaws? Although he had been prepared in his heart, he hadn't expected it to be fake to this extent. For the sake of some benefits and disputes, they could actually go to such an extent. Towards outsiders, they were even more unscrupulous. In public, he didn't even hesitate to use his own name to ask for something from others. How was this asking? This was simply robbery. Naked robbery. In addition to robbing, they even wanted to make the person who was being robbed feel grateful for his kindness in leading the way. Even a small county magistrate of a small place would have to consider the impact, right? Not to mention a prince. They were actually so unbearable. Could it be that he had failed in his teaching? His Majesty's complexion had turned pale. His fingers were slightly trembling. It was obvious that he was unable to restrain his anger. Mr. Wen stealthily extended his hand, and steadied him. I am very disappointed. The Emperor supported his forehead with one hand, and sat down in exhaustion. He had never lowered his proud head in the past 10 years. But now, it was the first time that he had lowered his head. Then, he said in a heavy tone, I am very disappointed. I also understand what you are thinking. Mr. Wen couldn't address the Emperor as Your Majesty in front of so many people. However, the royal family has always been without relatives. So, Your Majesty doesn't need to take this matter to heart. As an emperor, he has always been a loner. It is inevitable that he will have one or two unfilial descendants. Mr. Wen had spoken to the Emperor in such a manner. It could be said that he had spoken from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The Emperor had been outstanding since he was a child. He had succeeded the Crown Prince's position in the Eastern Palace without a hitch. His only brother, the Prince of Equality, had never competed with him. He had always been conceding to him. The Emperor was intelligent and far-sighted. But, he was still lacking in comparison to the ruthlessness of the founding emperors. He hadn't experienced the intense struggle in the harem. So, he was reluctant to abandon his family. It was admittedly fortunate that he had obtained the throne in such a manner. But, it was also unfortunate. Such an emperor was very loyal to his friends. This was one of the reasons why the big families had pledged their loyalty to him. But, it was also a fatal weakness. The emperor was also a human being. When such a monarch chose the next successor, he would definitely deliberately choose the one who was closest to him. However, luck might favor you, but it might not favor your son. How could he inherit the throne without a fight again? I'm just very curious. All three of them clearly had hope and a chance, but they didn't. But, why are they acting so unwisely? Especially the third prince. He has openly asked for something in front of so many people. Aren't they afraid of being ridiculed by the world? Or perhaps, they don't want me to know. The Emperor frowned and asked in a low voice. I believe that the three princes have considered this. The third prince isn't a fool. But right now, what he is thinking about the most is you. Mr. Wen smiled wisely. He wants you to know about his filial piety. He wants you to know about his position as the emperor as long as he gains your favor. As for the ridicule of the world, it doesn't matter. So long as you don't see it that way. Wouldn't it be a surprise if you weren't here when this wine was presented to the palace? Wouldn't it be a pleasant surprise? This is the third prince's true purpose. As for the rest, it's meaningless. Mr. Wen's comment was a bit callous, but it hit the nail on the head. The third prince has offered his filial piety, and you have tasted the delicacy. As for the subsequent memorials, what will they do? Yes. That's right. That's right. That's right. The emperor suddenly came to his senses. It seemed that his third son wasn't a brainless person. He was just too unscrupulous in his actions. He didn't care about the consequences. Was this what they meant by "man proposes but God disposes"? Mr. Wen, according to what you're seeing now, won't my 3 sons? The emperor clenched his teeth, kill each other in the future? Mr. Wen was startled. He wanted to say something, but he hesitated. What's wrong with this friend of mine? He's always been a wise and far-sighted person. Why is he asking such a childish question? Does this question even need to be answered? It seems as if they can't live under the same sky as each other. The person in power is bound to kill his own brothers, and expel his dissidents. Is this very hard to imagine? But, can I say it out loud at this time? You don't need to say it. I understand. The emperor weakly waved his hand. He covered his face, and slowly lowered his head. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. He rubbed his temples with his 2 fingers. This was his habit whenever he made an important decision. Mr. Wen, the aristocratic hall and the Jin Yang gang are obviously being manipulated by a very clever and mysterious person. As for the inside story of this matter, I absolutely do not believe that these 3 children were able to come up with it. Jun Zhan Tian can't, Tang Wanli can't, and my younger brother can't. The purpose of today's trip is to find this person. This person has wiped out all the rich families in the capital in one fell swoop. Those who haven't been wiped out are bound to become enemies because of today's meeting. Moreover, he has created an opportunity for the 3 princes to get in touch with the rich families. His Majesty suddenly raised his head. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If I'm not mistaken, the 3 princes' advisors and bodyguards are in close contact with the rich families. They are arranging a meeting date for their masters. This is a commonly used and necessary method. It doesn't matter what this person's intentions are. However, he has used a few thousand jars of wine to completely disrupt the current situation. This person cannot be underestimated. We must find him no matter what. As for the matter of the 3 princes, I will, carefully, consider it. His Majesty's facial muscles twitched painfully. I will make a decision later. Princess Raima was sitting in front of him. Her delicate body stiffened. She had never imagined that she would hear such words today. Hearing such words, wouldn't it make his already difficult situation even more unbearable? At this time, the transaction on the stage had come to an end. Yang Imo, the young prince of the Prince Equivalent's mansion, quietly stepped down. The third prince got what he wanted. He didn't spend a single silver and got the last 100 jars of wine. He couldn't wait to return to the palace to show his filial piety. A free and easy figure calmly came in front of Princess Raima and said, "Princess, it's my pleasure to meet you." Princess Raima raised her head and saw that the person was the eldest son of the Grand Preceptor, Li Yuran. Recommend a book. My good friend Tang Yuanyi's masterpiece of urban superpower, Golden Pupils. There is a direct train to the book page. Zhuang Rui, an employee of the pawn shop, had his eyes mutated in an accident. Beautiful ceramics, simple and elegant bronze wares, soul-stirring gambling on stones, kind and beautiful nurses, and frosty rich girls came one after another. His life had undergone earth-shaking changes. Chapter 255. So it's young Master Li. Princess Raima's face was still a little pale, and her mind was still unsettled. May I know why young Master Li is looking for me? The day before yesterday, I came to the palace to see you. However, you were busy at that time, so I couldn't meet you. Now that I see you, you are even more beautiful than before. You are a peerless beauty, and you are truly admirable. Li Yuran said in a low voice. Although the flattery was unbearably vulgar, the voice was as clear as spring water. It was very pleasant to hear, and even if one didn't like it, it was hard to dislike it. Young Master Li is flattering me. Princess Raima grew up listening to flattery, so she naturally wouldn't take it to heart. Young Master Li must be looking for Raimu, right? Young Master Li, please enlighten me. What she meant was, don't beat around the bush, I'm very annoyed. I heard that when the princess was attacked by an assassin, a mysterious Tianxian expert used a flying knife to help the princess escape. After that, there were 3 flying daggers that the princess regarded as treasures. Li Yuran chuckled. His expression was relaxed and indifferent. It was as if he was talking about a trivial matter. May I know if Yuran has the fortune to see the flying knife? May I know why young Master Li wants to see the flying knife? If young Master Li can enlighten me, I will gladly accept it. Princess Raimu immediately became vigilant. What does this Li Yuran want to do? Why does he want to see the flying knife? Yuran has no other meaning. Princess, you may not know, but when I was out a few days ago, I was unexpectedly attacked by a mysterious assassin. I was just a hair's breadth away from losing my life. Fortunately, a sky-blue flying dagger appeared out of nowhere at the critical moment, and repelled that assassin in an instant. It saved my life. Li Yuran's face was full of sincere admiration and gratitude. Moreover, it was filled with a deep fascination. The kindness of saving my life is like giving me a new lease on life, and I will always remember it in my heart. For the past few days, Yuran had been investigating openly and covertly, trying to find any information about her savior. However, to her shame, she had not received any news about her savior. That day, I suddenly remembered that the princess was once rescued by a mysterious expert. Since these 2 seniors are skilled in using flying daggers, I wonder if they are the same person. Li Yuran heaved a deep sigh. You don't expect to be repaid for your kindness. You save a life, but you leave indifferently. Such a refined person, it's really fascinating. I see. Princess Raima frowned. She felt that something was not right, but she could not tell what it was. After the benefactor left, there was only a small flying dagger left on the ground. It stood in the wind, shining brightly. Leisurely regarded it as a treasure and kept it close to my body, not daring to leave it for even a moment. Li Yuran's right hand reached into her bosom, and when she took it out again, a small and exquisite flying dagger appeared in her palm. This flying dagger was very different from the flying daggers that were commonly used in the pugilistic world. The body of the dagger was as thin as a cicada's wing, and shaped like a willow leaf. The hilt was slightly curved, and the tip of the dagger was slightly curved. The surface of the dagger was covered with cloud patterns, and the lines were very soft and smooth. At first glance, it did not look like a flying dagger that could easily kill a person, but rather, a piece of art that would make one unable to put it down. According to Li Yuran and Princess Raima's understanding, there were only a handful of people in the entire Tianxiang Empire who could make such an exquisite piece of art. So exquisite, so detailed. It was so adorable that one could not bear to touch it. Only the cold glint on its surface was like a demon from hell blinking its eyes in the night sky, revealing a trace of fierceness. Although it was not much, it was enough to penetrate deep into one's bones. Only then did people realize that this small flying dagger that would make one feel tender and tender was actually an unparalleled weapon that could easily kill and take away a person's life. If you look at the shape of the dagger, the 2 are almost exactly the same. Princess Raimu let out a long sigh of relief and smiled. However, although the style is indeed very similar, the forging materials and craftsmanship used for the 2 daggers are very different. The 2 are very different, I can confirm that. Ever since Li Yuran took out the flying dagger, her eyes had not left Princess Raimu's pretty face. At this moment, she finally looked away as if nothing had happened, and said with a smile, "Is it just that the style is very similar? I wonder what is the difference between the few flying daggers that the princess has and this one? If we were to really compare, which one is better? The flying dagger that Mr. Li obtained is cold to the touch, and the coldness can penetrate into one's bones. The quality is unique and the sharpness is unparalleled. Whether it is the quality, flexibility, or sharpness of the flying dagger, it is more than 10 times stronger than the 3 daggers that I have. The 3 daggers that I have are just ordinary iron, but the flying dagger that you obtained is worthy of being called a godly weapon. Princess Raima weighed the flying dagger in her hand, and she could not bear to put it down. This should be the item of the mysterious benefactor. Princess Raima could tell with one look. Only a peerless master would use such an elegant and beautiful item as a weapon for self-defense. There was elegance in the blood, and there was calmness in the coldness. This was the style of this flying dagger. In other words, this was the style of the benefactor. It was not something that an ordinary person could possess. For example, a scoundrel like Jun Moxie would never be able to use such a peerless weapon. From the time when Jun Moxie was assassinated until now, Princess Raima had imagined countless times how handsome and elegant a person who could use such an elegant flying dagger must be. How calm and unruffled must he be? Perhaps, that was the demeanor of a real man. Could a foppish brat like Jun Moxie be considered a man of indomitable spirit? She would regret it for half a year if she took one look at it. Humph, perhaps, only the benefactor was worthy of the 4 words, indomitable spirit. The two of them are so different. I wonder if I have the honor to see the treasures of the princess. I really want to know, is our benefactor the same person? Li Yuran's eyes were burning with just the right amount of heat. It was as if he had suddenly received news of his savior. So, he was unable to contain his impulsive excitement. The heavens have mercy on me. I, Li Yuran, finally have the honor to touch the weapon of my benefactor again. Although the benefactor doesn't expect to repay his kindness, how can we be indifferent after receiving his kindness? Li Yuran said righteously, if we don't know how to repay kindness, how are we different from beasts? Well said. Although the flying daggers I own are not as good as young Master Li's, they are still my treasured possession. I never leave them for others to admire or play with. However, based on young Master Li's words just now, I will make an exception. Miss Ling Meng looked at him with some appreciation. Who would have thought that this young Master Li's character would have such a clear distinction between gratitude and grudges? After muttering to himself for a moment, he reached into his bosom and pulled out a small cloth bag wrapped in an embroidered handkerchief. He slowly opened it to reveal 3 small flying daggers with peculiar designs. They were quietly lying inside the bag, gleaming with a cold light. Faintly, Princess Ling Meng's feminine fragrance could be sensed from them. The 2 are exactly the same. Li Yuran said excitedly. She even placed the flying dagger in her hand into the silk handkerchief. The 4 flying daggers were exactly the same. Other than the obvious difference in material, the size, shape, and casting process were all the same. The heavens have eyes. I finally found you. Li Yuran said, feeling moved. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he looked at Princess Ling Meng. There was a faint trace of sadness in his eyes. Now, he could confirm that the abominable murderer was related to Princess Ling Meng. There was no one else in the world who could make such a unique flying dagger. However, Princess Raima was the only woman that Li Yuran was interested in. If she were to be sacrificed, there was nothing she could do. Li Yuran sighed in her heart. I didn't expect young Master Li to be able to help my benefactor. There was a happy expression on Princess Ling Meng's face. It was unknown what she was thinking about, but she revealed a slight bashfulness. Her snow-white face was brimming with a faint blush, adding an infinite amount of radiance to the already beautiful Princess Ling Meng. Please take care of yourself, Princess. Although Li Yuran was a calm person, he was still awed by Princess Raima's peerless beauty. He stared blankly for a moment. Then, he came back to his senses and looked at the princess. There was a faint trace of regret in his eyes. But, it was replaced by coldness in an instant. I'll take my leave now. I'll pay a visit to the princess when I have time. Li Yuran bowed in a natural and unrestrained manner. Then, she turned around and left. As for the flying dagger, he didn't take it back. It was left inside the embroidered handkerchief in Princess Raima's hand. The murderer had been identified. So, it was useless for him to keep the flying dagger. Moreover, it was so small. So, what if it was a divine weapon? Princess Raima was puzzled as she watched Li Yuran leave. Young Master Li had been talking about how he cherished the divine weapon of his benefactor. He had been grateful for his benefactor's saving grace. Why did he suddenly throw it away? This seemed, Mr. Wen whispered from behind him, the eldest young master of the Grand Preceptor's mansion had been very unstable when he was talking. It was very strange. It could be said that he was very contradictory. The princess didn't have any murderous aura. He didn't reveal the slightest bit of malice either. But this old man felt that he was very conflicted in his heart. It seemed as if he felt that it was a pity. And this feeling was directed at the princess. If he didn't have malice in his heart, then he must know something that we don't. Your Majesty, we must guard against him for the sake of the princess's safety. The emperor narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, but I also wish to see who this mysterious expert is. He saw that Mr. Wen's expression was somewhat uneasy. Then, he smiled and said, don't forget that Ling Er has a bodyguard who never leaves her side. That bodyguard is Tian Xian's expert. So, there's no need to worry about her safety. Yi Guhan. Perhaps, things would have been better if he hadn't shown up before. Or if he hadn't protected the princess so frequently. Mr. Wen shook his head in disapproval. Who would want to make a move against the princess after the assassination attempt? If they didn't consider the factor of Yi Guhan, then wouldn't they be an idiot? Chapter 256. It doesn't matter. His Majesty's eyes were unfathomable as he smiled coldly. Ling Er is my daughter. How can I let anything happen to her? Who in the entire Tianxiang Empire would dare to touch her? I will annihilate his entire family. If anyone isn't afraid, then go ahead and try. Mr. Wen sighed. There is someone who isn't afraid. I haven't seen him annihilate his entire family. Even if you annihilate his entire family, will you be able to save your daughter if she dies? It seems that His Majesty has steeled his heart to walk this path. After the third prince's interference, the auction ended early. Other than Yang Imo and a few other people, everyone was happy. At this moment, people gradually began to leave the venue. Jun Dashao was standing on the second floor. He had seen General Duga Wudi and his son run away as if they were being followed by a ghost. He had almost laughed out loud. However, Duga Xiaoyi hadn't left yet. She was walking upstairs. Tell Tang Yuan and Song Shang to come to me as soon as you're done. I have other arrangements to make. Jun Moxie's face was somewhat heavy. It was only an auction. But, how could he reveal Jun Moxie's secret intentions? How could it be a trivial matter? A small butterfly fan could change the course of events. So, how could he organize an aristocratic auction at such a sensitive time? It could easily trigger earth-shattering changes. Third uncle, I have arranged people outside to pay attention to the secret contacts between the various families. They must retreat immediately, regardless of whether they have gained anything or not. Don't leave any traces behind. Everyone must quickly organize the information in their hands, and gather it in one place. After this, I'm sure that I'll have a good idea of the strength of the big families in Tianxiang. This is especially true for the strength of the vassal families in Tianxiang. Third uncle, you must make proper arrangements for this matter. You must not be careless. I understand. I will be careful. Jun Wui's face was somewhat serious as he nodded deeply. Only the third uncle, Tang Yuan, Song Shang, and the prince know that I'm the one who arranged this. Third uncle, Tang Yuan, and Song Shang should be fine after I remind them. As for the solitary falcon, he might be able to vaguely guess something, but it doesn't matter. Jun Imo Xia pondered in his heart, but didn't say anything. Instead, he raised his head to look at Yang Imo, who was gnashing his teeth in anger. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. Yang Imo, I'll write a few words for your father when you return. You mustn't let anyone else see it." Yang Imo replied in a muffled voice. "Yes, there is also Hai Chen Feng. Although he is a Tian Xian expert." Jun Moxie did not have the time to pay attention to Yang Mo's sadness. He continued to think about the loopholes in this operation. "Prepare for a rainy day, and you will be invincible." Although there were many people present, Jun Moxie felt that there was a pair of deep eyes looking for him everywhere. The sudden appearance of the two black-robed men behind Princess Raima made Jun Moxie feel a great sense of crisis. As the auction came to an end, the guests began to leave. The three princes left one after another, especially the third prince, who could not wait to present his filial piety to his imperial father. Only Princess Ling Meng remained seated on her chair, motionless. Ling Meng had long known that her three brothers were fighting for the throne and that they were as incompatible as fire and water. She also knew of her father's intentions. But to hear such a blatant discussion today, she could not accept it. These people were his father, his brothers and sisters. They were all his own flesh and blood. These people were her closest people. But, why, Princess Raima suddenly felt very lonely and helpless. She wanted to look for her close sisters like Duga Xiaoyi to talk to. She also wanted to find a broad shoulder to lean on. But, where could she find such a person? Princess Raima's beautiful eyes had always been bright. But, they were somewhat empty at this moment. She could not help but put her hand on her chest. There were 4 flying daggers there. These 4 divine weapons belonged to that man. They were the only things that could bring her comfort. The cold blade had already been warmed by his own body temperature. If the 2 black-clothed men behind her had disappeared, the Tian Xiang Emperor and Mr. Wen had left earlier than the rest of the crowd. So, how could the princess interfere with their comings and goings? The princess's maid saw that the princess had not come out for a long time. So, she finally came in and stood beside her. Then, she accompanied her as the crowd gradually dispersed. The hall gradually became empty. In fact, it was unusually spacious. Bursts of enchanting floral fragrance slowly filled the air. It gradually replaced the intoxicating aroma of the wine. It also drove away the different smells left behind by the crowd. And, the hall slowly became elegant once again. Rays of light shone in from all directions. The hall was bright and dark. The mournful melody of the flute continued to echo from upstairs. It seemed as if it was telling of the loneliness of a generation, and the sorrow of 1,000 years. Ling Meng sat quietly as she listened to the ethereal music. Her figure appeared even more frail and lonely. Jun Imo Xie had just arranged for Yang Imo to be sent away. This little heir had experienced too many things today. And, the blow he had suffered was also quite big. It was supposed to be a fun thing. He had come excitedly, but he had to go back with a broken body and mind. For a 10-year-old child, this was undoubtedly a cruel thing. However, Jun Imo Xie didn't try to console him. Nor did he try to make him happy. A precious sword's edge is sharpened. And, the plum blossom's fragrance comes from the bitter cold. How can the intoxicating fragrance of flowers and the peerless edge come without tempering? A child's growth will always depend on his own efforts. I've already planted an indelible seed in his tender heart today. And, I've also suffered such a blow and humiliation. So, I'm sure he'll grow up. Whatever he does in the future, the experience he's going to endure now will be the most valuable wealth in the future. Only after experiencing enough will he grow into an indomitable man. There is no such thing as depraved feelings in this world. Only after being wantonly played with and abandoned by others will one begin to play with life. There is no such thing as an ambitious person in this world. Only a person who has been oppressed by others for a long time will have a strong sense of loss. Then, they will come up with the idea of trampling the whole world under their feet. Everything has a cause, and a cause has an effect. One person can never replace another person to bear their pain. Hitman Jun won't do such a thing. Appreciation is one thing. But, Helping is another. If you can't even take the blow yourself, then I won't help you. Death is death. Death is death. There's no pity in death for those who can't help me. Even if that person was a good person, there's no exception. After all, there are too many good people who die in a single day in this world. Jun Dashao thought, I can't help. I'm not the savior of the world. Even if I were, I wouldn't be able to help. Tang Yuan's face was full of excitement. His chubby face was flushed with excitement. He opened his mouth and shouted, huge profits. Real huge profits. Wahahaha, I, Tang Yuan, have made money today. I didn't expect that I, Tang Yuan, would have such a day. I can hold my head high. Then, he suddenly jumped up and roared at Jun Moxie, 90 million taels. A whole 90 million taels, ah 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 ah. It seemed that Fatty was in a hysterical berserk state. Normally, Fatty wouldn't have dared to treat Jun Dashao like this. It was all because of money. Money. The original sin. Song Shang's face was gloomy as he followed behind him. There wasn't even the slightest bit of joy on his face. In Song Shang's mind, selling this heavenly wine to these so-called nobles was simply a waste of food. Master's wine was a rare treasure in this world. How could it be measured by mere money? Using money to measure it was simply a form of blasphemy. However, he didn't dare to disobey Master Jun's orders. Dugu Xiaoyi followed behind, jumping up and down with a face full of joy. It seemed that the success of this auction organized by Jun Moxie was more worthy of her happiness than her own success. Is that so? Jun Moxie looked at him with a smile. Fatty, your bonus this time is more than 10 million taels of silver. Do you have any plans for the future? Future plans? Tang Yuan rolled his eyes and thought for a moment. Then, he said with emotion, yes, why wouldn't I? I've always had a dream since I was young. Unfortunately, I never had enough money for my use. My family wouldn't give me such a large amount of money, so it never came true. As he said this, Fatty Tang sighed. He looked very fascinated, but also resentful. Occasionally, he looked a little relieved, happy that his long-cherished wish was about to come true, and apprehensive. What great dream! Tell me. Jun Moxie heard this and couldn't help but be interested. It was originally a casual question, but it turned out to be Fatty Tang's greatest dream. As a famous debauchee, how could Jun Mo Xie not be curious? This Fatty's heart was full of fat and dirty. So, how could he be hiding such a lofty life dream? That was a strange thing indeed. I've always thought that when I have money, money that truly belongs to me, enough money, I'll... Tang Yuan's face was full of sadness, causing the atmosphere in the room to become gloomy. Even Dugu Xiaoyi, who loved to tease Tang Yuan, couldn't help but shut her mouth, waiting for Fatty Tang to relax. Everyone was speechless. Everyone had a strange expression on their faces. As expected of the capital's most famous playboy, Dashao, even his dreams were so different. They couldn't help but be impressed. This is what I hate the most. Tang Yuan said angrily, that's right, he wants to sell, but he hangs a sign saying he sells his skills and not his body, and even calls himself a master. Bullsh *T master. There's even someone who dares to say, I'm sacrificing my body for art. What the hell? Damn it, if it wasn't for the money, why would he jump from house to house? Does he really think he's a saintess? Everyone was shocked again, but Fatty's words seemed to be somewhat reasonable. Since it's not for money, and this and that master look is not bad, why not find a man to marry? No matter what, it's better than doing this, right? To put it bluntly, he's being cheap. Motherfucker, what do you mean by selling his skills and not his body? I'll smash them one by one with money. Tang Yuan was filled with righteous indignation. Chapter 257. Fatty, this dream of yours is too spectacular. Jun Moxie wiped his mouth. It seemed that he was at a loss for words. He remembered that Fatty had talked about it the last time. This time, it was obvious that his paranoia had been aroused. June Moxie could only describe Fatty's craziness in one sentence: a poor man suddenly becomes rich, and has too much money to burn. Fatty Tang, you are too shameless. Dugu Xiaoyi's face was flushed red, and her almond-shaped eyes were wide open. She hadn't expected that she would be deceived by Fatty. She had held her breath for so long just to hear these shameless remarks. Fatty's shamelessness had obviously reached a very high realm that everyone could only look up to. Fatty, don't be so indignant. Ahem. June Moxie coughed twice. I have a serious matter to discuss with you. Go ahead, I will hire a few carriages and bring the money to the Spirit Fog Lake. I want to spend tens of millions of taels in one night. Let's see if anyone can resist. Tang Yuan waved his hand in an overbearing manner. His mouth was dry from speaking so much that he picked up a cup from the table. He didn't ask who it belonged to, and gulped it down in one gulp. About this auction. June Dashao's face sank. His deep eyes swept across everyone's faces. Everyone suddenly felt suffocated. They couldn't help but become serious. Among the Tian Xian experts, there were Jun Wui, Song Shang, and Hai Chen Feng. Third Master June Dashao had the status of an elder. But under June Dashao's awe-inspiring gaze, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. The sharpness of June Moxie's gaze had left these people very surprised. Jun Wui sighed in admiration in his heart. Perhaps this was the unique temperament of a person in a superior position. There was no need to deliberately show it, and it would naturally give others a feeling of being superior and infinitely intimidating. Even a great general like him, who had led thousands of troops and fought bloody battles for his entire life, could not help but feel this kind of pressure from the bottom of his heart, let alone others. The auction this time was your idea. Tang Yuan, do you understand? June Moxie looked at Tang Yuan with a pair of sharp eyes and said word by word. Was this auction my idea? Tang Yuan scratched his head, a look of bewilderment on his face. Not only was she confused by the meaning behind June Dashao's words, but she was also confused by the word Tang Yuan. It was rare for June Dashao to call Fatty by his real name. The two of them could be said to have a deep friendship. Usually, they would address each other as you and me, or third young master or Fatty. It was extremely rare for June Dashao to call him by his real name. That's right. This auction was all your idea. No matter who asks, it was your idea. Do you understand? June Moxie's tone became more serious. I said, no matter who asks, they must answer like this. No exceptions. Do you understand what this means? I understand. Even if you ask in the future, it was my idea. Fatty Tang said with some self-satisfaction, I didn't think that my brain would be so good. Bah! My brain is always good. I also thought of this idea. No, it was my idea. Who would dare to doubt it? Who would dare to doubt it? If you doubt me, I will not live under the same sky with you. Who dares to doubt my brain? Do you want to die? Yes. As for your original intention, it was to make money. The reason why this place is called Aristocratic Hall is because only aristocrats have money. The reason why some people were invited and some didn't was to stimulate consumption. In short, everything was arranged for the sake of money. Do you understand? June Moxie glared at him. It doesn't matter how much you don't understand now. But, you will understand everything later. From now on, from this moment onwards, the idea of establishing the aristocratic hall was your idea. You will think about it now. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to? In short, if you can't think of a reasonable explanation, then forget about going to the Spirit Fog Lake, don't even think about taking a step out of the aristocratic hall. June Moxie was extremely unreasonable. He spoke in a tough and overbearing manner. Brother, take the blame for me this time. What reasonable explanation is needed for this? I am a genius. Such a simple little plot can be figured out as long as you use your brain. Is there a need to make such a fuss? Wahaha. Tang Yuan burst into laughter. He seemed to be very indifferent as he casually explained. The fat on his body was jiggling in a disorderly manner. He didn't seem to care about this at all. Only his slender eyes looked at June Moxie. They betrayed him because they contained an indescribable sense of worry. Tang Yuan wasn't a fool. On the contrary, he was very smart. In fact, the young Master June wouldn't have looked for him as a partner if he didn't have a brain. Fatty clearly knew that June Moxie had encountered something since he had said this. Or perhaps he had thought of something. And the June family's situation didn't allow June Moxie to be so outstanding. Therefore, he had no choice but to take the blame this time. As for whether or not he could afford to take the blame, and whether or not people would believe him, it wasn't important. After all, Fatty was the ideal candidate to take the blame at this stage. He believed that all the questions would be left unanswered in the end. And the most important point was that June Moxie's idea would certainly make people suspect June Moxie. But no one would be able to confirm it. These were two completely different things. Fatty had long since regarded the third young Master June as his own blood brother. In fact, the Tang family's Fatty's generation didn't have many children, but there were still quite a few of them. In fact, he even had a few blood brothers. However, Fatty had always regarded this fair-weather friend of his as his closest blood brother. It was precisely because of this that Fatty had chosen to help the hitman June without any hesitation. He didn't care about the reward, and he didn't care about the consequences. On the other side, Dugu Xiaoyi's face suddenly turned pale. Although the little girl was naive, she was also an exceptionally intelligent person. Obviously, she had also thought of something. Although she hadn't thought that far into the future, she was most worried about the fact that this matter had happened to June Moxie. As long as the scoundrel June was involved, no matter what, Dugu Xiaoyi wouldn't take it lightly. Even if it was the most trivial matter. Seeing the worry in Tang Yuan's eyes and the worry on Dugu Xiaoyi's face, June Moxie couldn't help but feel inexplicably comforted. He pretended to smile indifferently and said, "It's all right. If you don't believe me, you can look at the third uncle. The third uncle has the appearance of a strategist, and he isn't worried at all. Isn't that enough to explain everything? The third uncle is most worried about me. Even if you don't believe me, can't you believe in my third uncle?" Dugu Xiaoyi turned her eyes to look, and saw Jun Wui smiling faintly. He was sitting there, and didn't seem to be worried about this matter. Seeing the little girl look over, Jun Wui smiled and said, "Don't worry, just do your best. My Jun family will be able to protect a single person in the Tianxiang Empire as long as those ancient super families don't make a move." The little girl felt as if she had eaten a tranquilizer when she heard Jun Wui's words. Jun Wui's words were plain, but his determination to do whatever it takes was clearly revealed. The little girl was relieved, but Fatty was even more worried. Fatty wasn't as naive as the little girl. Although he didn't fully understand the mysteries of the situation, he still understood that Jun Sunshao wouldn't have acted like that if there hadn't been a change in the situation. Jun Wui's words were admittedly correct, but what about those super families? There's also the royal family. These forces aren't something that the Jun family can keep in check. I must do everything I can to help my brother, no matter what. Fatty and the little girl didn't know that their worries, and sense of duty had given them the true feelings of the hitman Jun. And in his entire life, only a few people had been able to obtain this true feeling. At this time, someone suddenly came to report that Princess Raimu had invited Miss Dugu to leave. Dugu Xiaoyi stood up and looked at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie smiled and nodded, indicating that she could go. Dugu Xiaoyi took 2 steps forward, and then suddenly turned back. She walked in front of Jun Imo Xia, and gently straightened his collar with her small hands. She then said in a low voice, You have to be careful in everything you do, you big idiot." Then, the little girl lowered her head, and ran out like a wisp of smoke. Xiao Bai, who had been clinging to Jun Moxie since entering the room, cried out, and looked at Jun Moxie with great reluctance. Then, he turned into a white shadow, and followed after Dugu Xiaoyi. It's all right, you can go back to your own business. By the way, Fatty, you can't touch the money for the time being. June Moxie directly dispelled Fatty's fantasies. He took out a piece of paper from his bosom, and it was densely written with the names of the herbs. Spread the word, and buy these herbs at all costs. June Moxie carefully handed the paper to Tang Yuan. I want as much as you can, the more the better. The sooner the better. Heavenly star grass, tricolored Ganoderma, 9 mysterious root, dream incense, 1,000 leaves grass, blood pill plant, dragon beard leaf, black ginseng, purple bamboo fruit, pangolin stem. Tang Yuan sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Even with Fatty Tang's knowledge, he didn't know how much these medicinal ingredients were worth. However, he was surprised at the number of these medicinal ingredients. Moreover, the quantity required was enormous. This made Fatty feel that his share of the shares would slip away from his fingers in the blink of an eye. Third young master, my dear brother. Tang Yuan had a sullen look on his face. That's my lifelong ambition. I've lived for this goal. You can't be so cruel. You squandered the small amount of money I just earned. You should have left some for your brother. I was expelled from my family, and my hands are really a small amount of money. Fatty's dividend was estimated to be more than 10 million silver taels. The Tianxiang Empire's annual military expenditure was only 30 million silver taels, and that's all. June Moxie kicked him, and scolded him with a smile. Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up. You'll have as much money as you want as long as you collect all these herbs. Do you think that the aristocratic hall will only open for business this once? This young master doesn't care about your small amount of money. Wait until next time, and I'll let you know what's called big money. There was something even more exaggerated. If this was really a small amount of money, then how much money would it be? How big would it be? How big would it be? Fatty beamed with joy when he heard that there was going to be a big deal later on. He said, that's good, that's good. Third young master, this wine, is it really going to be auctioned this once? You won't sell it later? It's a pity. Chapter 258. That's right. Master's words are very reasonable. They don't deserve it. Song Shang was listening on the side. He felt very happy. So, he came closer and licked his lips. Master, when will you teach me how to brew wine? Anytime. But, Song Shang, I must warn you. From now on, other than our own people, no one else will be able to drink the wine we brewed. That's because our wine will be more delicious than today's wine. Do you understand? June Moxie smiled evilly. Your disciple understands. How can these ordinary people drink the wine that we, master and disciple, brew? How can our sect's immortal wine be tasted by those ordinary people? This is probably the main reason why our immortal wine has never been spread in the world of mortals. How can an immortal wine that transcends the mortal world be tainted by the common people? Song Shang's tone was very disdainful. It was obvious that he was trembling along with this unscrupulous master. On the contrary, June Dashao was a bit dazed. What is this guy talking about? How come I'm confused by him? Well, you may withdraw first. The matter of purchasing herbs will begin immediately. June Moxie waved his hand. Jun Wui frowned after the two of them had withdrawn. He then said, Xia, this operation seems to have caused too much of a commotion. I'm afraid, I believe it won't be a problem. June Moxie chuckled and said, Third uncle, you had said that you would return to your residence after seeing Dugu Wudi. But, you're still here. So, something interesting must have happened, right? You little devil. Nothing can be hidden from you. Jun Wui smiled helplessly and said, There's news from Jiangnan, oh? A light flashed in June Moxie's eyes. The Zhao Trading Company has successfully completed the production of the Xian Beast Tendon crossbow. It will be shipped to the capital soon. Jun Wui's voice was very heavy as he said slowly, at the same time, there have been many experts who have disappeared recently. They seem to be ready to make a move. It seems that the second prince is going to make a big move this time. Yes, that's not hard to guess. The bigger they make a ruckus, the better it is for us to hide behind the scenes and reap the benefits. Especially this batch of crossbows, we are determined to get them. The Zhao Merchant Guild sending it to the capital is tantamount to giving us a gift. Hee hee. Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes. Don't let your guard down. Be careful. Recently, the situation was getting more and more tense. He believed that the second prince would not act carelessly. Aside from elite personnel, there will also be experts hired by the second prince to escort him along the way. There will also be people from the number 1 guild in Jiangnan who will be responsible for escorting him. Furthermore, it is highly likely that the Blood Sword Hall will also send people to escort him in secret. Jun Wui frowned deeply. There are already so many forces that we know about in the open and in the dark. Their influence is quite considerable. I believe that there are many forces that we don't know about. If we want to snatch the Xian Beast Tendon crossbows from such a powerful force, how much power would we have to use? And how much price would we have to pay? Moreover, we would have to do it quietly and without leaving any traces. Jun Wui sighed deeply. I'm afraid that it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. As difficult as ascending to the heavens, but as easy as turning over one's hand. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. His eyes emitted a strange and evil light. His handsome face appeared somewhat indifferent and strangely charming. Everything depends on human effort. If we don't do it because it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens, then it would be even more difficult than ascending to the heavens. But as long as we do it, there will always be a way. In this world, daring to think of anything is already half the battle won. That's right. Jun Wui agreed. Third uncle, how long will it take for them to reach the capital? Jun Moxie muttered, in other words, how long do we have to prepare? I need to know the most detailed and specific time. From Jiangnan to the capital, they would first travel by water for about 2 days. Then, they would disembark. After that, they would have to walk for another 3 days before entering the capital. Jun Wui muttered to himself for a moment, then said accurately, I'm estimating this based on the path of experts. Since they are escorting such a deadly thing, there will certainly not be any mediocre people. Their speed on foot would also be much faster than an average person's. But if they were to cooperate in many aspects, it would take at least 5 days. In other words, we still have more than 5 days to make arrangements. Jun Moxie slowly nodded. Not only that. The second prince's people will first reach Jiangnan, and then they will set off. In other words, it will take at least 10 days for them to reach the capital. Jun Wui said decisively. 10 days? That's enough. Jun Moxie laughed evilly. No one knew what he was thinking, but he actually laughed in a very happy manner. Third uncle, let me reiterate one point. What I need is the most accurate information. What kind of people did the Zhao family send this time? What kind of strength does each organization have? What kind of strength did the first guild dispatch? Who did the second prince dispatch in the capital? How many troops do they have? As for the Blood Sword Hall, since we can't get any information about them, we can let them go for now. When the time comes, we will act according to the situation. That's not a problem. Jun Wui's hands tightly gripped the wheelchair. His face was calm as usual. The only thing I'm interested to know is what kind of strength do we need to dispatch. The people from the Jun family's Hall of Worship cannot be touched. We can only use 300 guards, and 3 Tian Xian experts. Jun Moxie grinned. Third uncle, you, Hai Chen Feng, and Song Shang, the 3 of you are already the backbone of our side. I'm afraid that the 3 of us are far from enough. Can we let Eagle? Jun Wui didn't finish his words, but the meaning behind them was extremely obvious. Absolutely not. Jun Mo Xia vehemently rejected the idea. On the one hand, the solitary falcon is too big of a target, and it would be too easy for his identity to be exposed. Not to mention, with his temperament, he would never be willing to accept my assignment to do such a sneaky thing, especially since it would conflict with our original agreement, and would interfere with our future plans. It will go against our original intentions. If we are afraid of being exposed, Hai Chen-feng's characteristics are very obvious. I'm afraid it will be very difficult to hide his identity. Jun Wui said. This is not a problem. When the time comes, I will find a way to remove that special sky blue color from his body. Jun Mo Xia said confidently. He raised his head, and slowly walked to the window. Then, he looked down from above and said in a dull tone, this will be an unprecedentedly fierce battle. And, it will be a bitter battle. But we can only bear it by ourselves. There is no one else we can rely on in the face of this. We can only rely on ourselves. In the future, our Jun family will rely on ourselves for everything, and we will slowly rise. No one can stop our rise. Jun Moxie's voice was very low, but it was very firm and very powerful. Princess Raimu held Dugu Xiaoyi's arm and slowly walked out. In the opposite tea house, a tall and sturdy woman stood up and walked down with big strides. It was Sun Xiaomei, Fatty Tang's fiancée. She had arrived a long time ago, but did not go in. You don't look well. Sun Xiaomei looked at Princess Raimu, and her eyes flashed as she asked with concern, did something happen? Sun Xiaomei was born with the heroic appearance of a man, but she was very kind and intelligent. She was the elder sister of Princess Raimu, Dugu Xiaoyi, and the rest of the sisters, and they would not hide their worries from this caring elder sister. I won't hide it from you, elder sister. Something has happened. It's hard for me to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it, Princess Raimu rubbed her forehead wearily, and said sadly. Sun Xiaomei was very quick-witted. She immediately understood that Princess Raimu must be talking about the royal family, and it was not something she could explain, so she did not say anything. Princess Raimu was also a very smart person. Seeing that Sister Sun did not say anything, she immediately realized what was wrong with her today. She was putting Sister Sun in a difficult position, so she quickly said, it's a pity that you weren't there just now. Otherwise, you could help me take a look at a person and see what he meant. I can't figure it out no matter how hard I think about it. His behavior is really weird. Who is that person? Why is it weird? Sun Xiaomei could not help but be interested. Li Yuran, the top disciple of the third generation of the Li family. Princess Raimu lowered her voice, and told her what she thought was weird, especially about Li Yuran's weird attitude. Out of a woman's intuition, Princess Raimu sharply felt that there was something wrong. Li Yuran, this person. Sun Xiaomei pondered for a long time, as if it was difficult for her to find the right words. After a long time, she said with difficulty, is the same as Jun Moxie. If you can't look at him carefully, you can't understand him, and you can't explain him clearly. Jun Moxie. Princess Raimu screamed in surprise. Jun Moxie and Li Yuran? How can you talk about these two people together? Is there any place that can be compared? These two men aren't worthy of being mentioned in the same breath. But, they aren't simple. Sun Xiaomei chuckled. She didn't express her opinion. She didn't give any detailed explanation. But after walking for a while, she said in a low voice, almost as if she was talking to herself, but I feel that Jun Moxie is more dangerous than Li Yuran. Sister Xiaomei, I don't understand. Since we got together, I found that you are very good at judging people. Dugu Xiaoyi did not hear Sun Xiaomei's low voice. But that day, you said that my brother Mo Xia is arrogant. I really can't see it. How is he arrogant? He is just a hooligan, a little more rogue. That's not bad. Anyway, I think he is handsome. You will regret missing today's event. Sister Raimu and I saw it. Brother Mo Xia is really handsome. Really, hee. Don't mention your brother Mo Xia's way of doing things. I am annoyed. Princess Raimu said, Xiao Yi, you have to think about this carefully. Don't do something that you will regret for the rest of your life because of a moment of impulse. Listen to me. Dugu Xiaoyi was somewhat unconvinced. She snorted and muttered, "What's so bad about brother Mo Xie? Don't tell me that your brothers are very good." Princess Ling Meng was left speechless. It was true that Jun Mo Xia was a debauchee, a tyrannical debauchee, committing all sorts of crimes, and even running amok. However, he was not as unbearable as her brother. Chapter 259. The little girl saw that Princess Raima was distressed. She knew that she had made a slip of the tongue. She wanted to comfort her, but she didn't know how to open her mouth. So, she was also dumbfounded. The three women remained silent for a long time. Finally, Sun Xiaomei broke the deadlock. But, she answered Dugu Xiaoyi's question, "You two also know that my body has suddenly grown like this ever since I was a child. My appearance is like this. So, how can my temperament be stable?" Sun Xiaomei's mouth twitched bitterly. "I never dared to go out. I always stayed at home and read books. I didn't want to eat for several days. I wanted to lose weight, but it was to no avail. Until I met my master." She heaved a long sigh and continued, "I got that strange disease when I was 5 years old. And it's been 13 years since then. I've become accustomed to it. And I've seen through it. I don't care about my appearance. Do I look at people based on their beauty or ugliness? So, I look at people based on my feelings. As for how they look, how they behave, they're all secondary. The most important thing is how a person's nature is. This is something that can only be seen clearly if you look carefully." Sun Xiaomei smiled. But, her smile was somewhat desolate. "Little sister Xiaoyi, Jun Moxie is different from what he's always shown. He's always been a debauchee. I'm afraid that's not necessarily his pretense. He's just acting according to his nature. I've only known him for a short time. I've only met him once. But, I understand that he doesn't care about what others think of him. He does things his own way. He clearly doesn't put the world in his eyes. So, I call it arrogance." Sun Xiaomei smiled faintly, "Or, you can call it evil." The little girl thought deeply. She continued to listen attentively to her elder sister Xiaomei's narration, "But, I can see that this person has a problem. It may not be a problem for him. But the third young master Jun is more ruthless than anyone else. So, you mustn't pay too much before you're sure that you've moved him. If that's the case, little sister Xiaoyi, I'm afraid you'll be in great pain." Dugu Xiaoyi pursed her small and rosy lips. There was some dissatisfaction in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. Although her words didn't enter her ears, she knew that Xiaomei's words were full of concern and didn't have any ill intentions. Sun Xiaomei knew that she wouldn't listen to her and sighed secretly. Princess Raima had been walking beside them as if she was sleepwalking. She seemed to have heard the conversation between the two of them, but at the same time, she seemed to have not heard anything at all. Her mind was in a mess, and she had no idea what she was thinking. After a while, she realized that the two sisters had already stopped talking. "Raimo, your mental state isn't very good. You should go back to the palace and rest." Sun Xiaomei looked at her worriedly. "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back." Princess Raima was most afraid of going back to the palace. She didn't know what kind of attitude and mood she should have when she went back to that place. She didn't know what kind of attitude and mood she should have when facing her relatives. "Sister Raima, since you don't want to go back to the palace, why don't we go and find Jun Moxie?" Dugu Xiaoyi rolled her eyes and suggested, "There are a lot of fun things in that guy's house." Little White, who was in her arms, popped out its furry little head and looked around. This little thing had already reached the 8th level and was already psychic. When it heard that its master was going to bring it to the good guy's house, how could it not be happy? "That's good too. I want to see what's so special about this guy that Xiao Yi is in love with and that Sister Xiaomei highly admires." Princess Ling Meng forced herself to raise her spirits. Then, She gave a self-deprecating smile and said, "I can't even see what's so good about such a hero. Could it be that I have been blind for the past 10 years? Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She was a little angry. She could hear that this was different from Sister Xiaomei's kind warning. Princess Raima's words were full of ridicule. She couldn't help but refute, "That's because you've always been biased. You hate him the moment you see him. How can you see what's good about him? Anyway, my eyes are bright." The two of them quarreled along the way. Sun Xiaomei smiled and followed by the side. She watched the two sisters stick to their own opinions and quarrel. Then, the three of them walked in the direction of the June residence with the 6 maids behind them. After bickering with Dugu Xiaoyi along the way, Princess Raima's mood slowly calmed down. This place was not far from the June family's residence. It was still a bustling street, and there were people coming and going all around. Seeing these two stunning beauties walking on the street with their maids, no one could help but stare at them, feasting their eyes on them. After all, some people might not even get to see these two beauties even once in their lifetime. But this time, they saw 2 of them. Some Confucian scholars walked by with a sanctimonious look, but after taking a glance, they hurriedly turned their heads away. However, when they were far away, they would sneakily look back halfway. In their eyes, there was a look of, "I'm admiring beauty." However, in their hearts, they were fantasizing, "My behavior is different from others, I wonder if this beauty will look at me differently because I'm different." Suddenly, a gust of wind rose. 2 sky-blue rays of light soared into the sky at the same time. From 2 different directions, they shot towards Princess Raimu and the others like lightning. They were unstoppable. An angry roar was heard. A figure dressed entirely in black, his body glowing with an enchanting blue radiance. The long sword in his hand condensed into a rainbow-like halo of light. It was bright and dazzling as it shot down. It carried a sense of loneliness and desolation as it brazenly stood in front of Princess Raimu. 1 man and 1 sword, he single-handedly blocked the siege of 2 Tianxian experts of the same level. The person who had come was Yi Gahan. Bang! Bang! The 3 of them retreated at the same time. The 2 black-clothed and masked Tianxian experts retreated and advanced again. The same dazzling blue light flashed as they attacked fiercely towards Yi Gahan. Yi Gahan Lengleng smiled. He did not panic. His long sword swayed and sprinkled blue rays of light all over the sky. His sword was aimed at the enemy's vital points. Even though 1 was inferior to 2, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage. The sudden occurrence of such a thing on the street caused the crowd to scream and flee in all directions. In an instant, the entire street became empty. Just when Yi Gahan and the other 2 were fighting, another long roar was heard. Another 3 sky-blue figures pounced from 3 different directions at high speed. Their target was still Princess Raimu, who was behind Yi Gahan. Yi Gahan shouted loudly. His eyes emitted a reckless light as he suddenly retreated. The 2 black-clothed and masked men who were fighting with him were attacking. Yi Gahan did not dodge. He took a palm and a kick head-on. He raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He did a somersault and landed accurately in front of Princess Raimu. His long sword made a swishing sound. His hair and beard were messed up, but he did not give way. The 3 people attacked at the same time. The first 2 people did not hesitate after their first attack. They followed Yi Gahan's retreat and rushed over again like lightning. The anger in Yi Gahan's eyes suddenly disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a blood-red color. In the blood-red color, there was tranquility. Tranquility. The sky-blue chi on his body was getting thicker and thicker. The killing momentum of his long sword was getting sharper and sharper. He moved back and forth like a mad tiger. But his footwork and swordsmanship were not messed up at all. He actually fought against 5 Tianxian masters by himself. While they were busy, they grabbed Princess Raima's delicate body at the same time. They tried their best to throw her far away and shouted, "Run!" Princess Raima's delicate body flew up in the air. She flew for more than 10 feet before finally landing on the ground. Her eyes were red and tears came out. She choked and said, "Uncle Yi, apart from that senior expert, the only person who truly treated him well in this world was Uncle Yi." Sun Xiaomei's eyes flashed. Her mind was racing. The enemy's target is obviously Princess Raimu. Yi Gehan may not be able to stop 5 Tian Xian masters by himself. The only thing I can do now is to ask for reinforcements as soon as possible. However, the enemy's reinforcements consisted of 5 Sky Xian experts. This kind of strength could be considered as one of the best in the entire Tian Xiang Empire. In fact, even the great families of Tian Xiang might not have such strength. Xiao Yi, let Little White go and ask for reinforcements. Sun Xiaomei was smart. She saw Little White in Dugu Xiaoyi's arms. Her eyes were full of vigilance. So, she immediately thought of this idea. It was already too late for either of them to ask for help. Moreover, they might not be able to escape. But Little White was different. Although he was young and his strength was not high, his speed was at the 8th level. Even the Shenxian masters would not be able to catch up with him. Moreover, he was so small that it would be even harder to catch him. Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly came to her senses. She grabbed Little White from her arms and said, "Little White, I'm counting on you. Hurry and tell my father that they are here to save me. Go quickly." Sun Xiaomei said anxiously, "What are you waiting for?" Suddenly, he cut his own arm with a schwat sound. He endured the pain, and grabbed Dugu Xiaoyi's clothes. He tore off a piece of cloth, and dipped it in his own blood. Then, he quickly tied it to Little White's white leg, and threw it away. The Dugu family would know that Dugu Xiaoyi was in danger if they saw this blood-stained cloth. Then, they would rush over immediately. Other than that, they could only wait. Little White let out a cry and shot out like an arrow. One of the black-masked men laughed evilly and shouted, "Little bastard, where are you going?" He reached out his hand to grab Little White. He thought that such a young beast would not be able to withstand his grab. Who would have thought? Little White angrily jumped and suddenly revealed its sharp teeth. It fiercely bit the man in black's hand. At the same time, it stretched out its front claws like lightning. At the same time, its sharp claws scratched out and actually tore off a piece of flesh from the man's arm. Little White proudly howled and quickly ran out of everyone's line of sight, disappearing like a wisp of smoke. The black-masked man cried out in pain. This time, it was really painful to the bone. A Tian Xian master was actually injured to this extent by a small beast cub because he underestimated the enemy. He did not know that although this was a young beast cub, it was actually at the 8th level. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.